Yeah! Hey!
Hi.
Hello. Greetings, one and all, to the somber tale of a fallen knight.
Oh.
3 years. We'll be acting out Specter of Torment using Amiibo, and we'll just go through the whole plot. So I have King Knight here.
Chat's disabled for this live stream. Then you in the wrong live stream.
You're in the previous one. Specter Knight Amiibo, Plague Knight, King Knight. We actually don't need the Shovel Knight Amiibo to tell Specter Knight stories, so we can just put him in a different room entirely. I'll just... Need a little bit more time to get started. The other thing crashed when I did. Alright, great. Top of my head. Camera's so high up. So, David.
Can't change it at all. That can't. I don't know. Those are...
No. Sorry, I jumped the gun in starting the stream, but we're gonna get started right
okay.
here.
Everyone is totally cool.
So-
seeing us set up.
This is probably the most exciting part. You want to get in on a stream when they're still adjusting the audio levels.
Still awkward.
Moving the camera.
Yes.
It's definitely still going to be awkward. Nothing we can do will fix that. It's been nigh on 7 years now. It's going to be exactly this. Being exciting. How about chat?
Oh.
All right. So we'll start a little more formally now. I'm Ian Flood. I'm a programmer here at Yacht Club Games. I made like Specter Knight's Mobility and a bunch of other stuff.
And I'm David. I'm also a programmer, and I didn't make Specter Knight's Mobility.
No, you did a bunch of other stuff.
But I was like, put it in a dash slash.
That's true. So today we're going to play through Specter of Torment with the Specter Knight Amiibo Fairy. And I think Specter Knight's nice and varied enough since you can go through in any order, upgrade relics in any order. So I don't think we need too many cheats to spice it up. And I think let's just like hand off each stage. We'll talk through our memories.
That's too much fun.
Organized, too much fun.
Wow.
We use Lich Lord armor too.
Yeah.
You know what? Yeah, go ahead and switch to game.
Let's go with Spect.
It's Spect.
Alright.
It lines up with the help. And that it doesn't.
Man, this was 3 years ago. That's crazy.
This game came out 3 years ago. It came out alongside the Switch. Were you guys there day one, or were you kind of lost in Breath of the Wild land?
Stop working on 4.1 on Switch because of facts. No.
Nope.
Definitely not.
4.1 was still in test, and it was submitted. We're waiting on Nintendo to respond. Different platforms take a certain amount of time to clear testing, and all the versions are out with all the platform holders. But don't worry, it'll be ready soon.
When making Specter of Torment, were there any other ideas you had for this movie? I guess we'll just start.
We're going to jump in and talk about some of our own memories, and we'll read questions as well.
Yeah, well.
Hey,
Okay, I'll start. Okay. Whoa! This logo wasn't there when it first shipped, I don't think.
Sure.
Was it? I don't remember. I can't remember.
Yeah.
That's not one of my memories. So like this, we like kept the screen the same. We made it purple this time.
So
I remember it being a different color.
The order for storybooks, it's usually we rough it out, then we get the text finalized, and the last step is the music going in.
Yeah.
And so we've seen this art lots of times, but I always get chills seeing it with the music company in it, especially here.
Yeah. An interesting thing is that I think we originally intended it to match the Plague of Shadows one, where you saw all the knights and everything, and it focused on it. But we couldn't get like all the ideas across, I think, and that's why we like went with the Mega Man. Was it 4 that does this? Yeah, so we changed them up.
Also, if you've never played Specter of Torment, it's half off on many platforms, as you'll see in the corner. We recommend picking it up today. There, that's my last hard sell that I'll ever do for
There's
Specter
gonna
of
be
Torment.
another one. Nice try.
I'm gonna verbally explain a link to you, and you'll have to click it. Oh yeah, such intrigue.
You know, I'm always surprised when people watch this that they don't like, obviously, they don't go like, Shield Knight, whoa.
Well, that's because there's an all-new person in the corner with a beard. You're like, whoa, who's that?
An interesting part about this is that, like, in most of the campaigns, you don't, like, play the storybook part, right? But, like, we show scenes here that you actually play. And I remember when we first did the art, I remember thinking, oh man, that's so cool.
It's more of like a look at what the adventure will be.
Yeah, fun fact is that Specter Knight used to be in a different pose at the start.
He would sit with his scythe behind
him.
him.
And you can still see it in the game. Is it just
a
cheat code?
If you have the fancy armor.
Oh, it's fancy
armor. The garish garb, you'll still wield it.
Yeah, and then no one liked it.
It just looked like he was like being sexy.
Yeah, right. And so then we went with this one.
Yeah, from the outset, the goal for this was, well, you already played Plague of Shadows, we hoped, and you already played Shovel Knight. So this game needed to start completely different from like the first screenshot. It should look like an all-new adventure, because it was.
And this is a big change from the game too. That I think this was your idea, right? That we like usually when you start, it like does the you can do it and then you can press any button to play. But this one I like have to like hit the get out of the mode, get out of the intro.
You have to will Specter Knight to begin his adventure.
Yeah.
All right. When I think of this level, I also think of one, Settlers of Catan, because it looks like the box, and two, the Sun of America. Keep playing. We should go at a good clip. We shouldn't stop.
All right. I'm trying to remember my thing.
Don't remember, just go. Well, whenever I see this level, I think I remember the most of the old-style Specter Knight relics. Because in the initial revs of Specter Knight, you wouldn't have an inventory of sub-weapons. You would find them in the level, much like Castlevania.
Right.
And so this was one of the first levels we put together for Specter Knight. And so we had all those. They actually would have the Manny minions, the little like shadowy creatures. And so you'd see them holding like a scythe, and you'd have to like go pick it up. And then we hit so many design issues with that, just in terms of how it felt and how it would feel in the long run to play with it. So we kept iterating on it. We're like, well, you probably want a certain sub-weapon before a boss. So we'll put like an item box style thing where it cycles through many of them and you could pick which one you want. And then we ran into issues with if you were, we wanted you to feel like you really had ownership over them and they didn't feel like completely random. So we had upgrading the sub-weapons as exists in the game here. But then we ran into the issue where you would spend all this money to upgrade a sub-weapon, but maybe you went through the whole level and you never got it because it was in this Castlevania style candle system. We're like, well, maybe if you upgraded it, you could buy something so you always start with it. And then we're like, wait, what are we doing?
So exhausting.
Yeah, what are we doing? We should take it out. And then we took it out, and the game is much better for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long story, but hopefully you're as exhausted as we were working on the project. But I hope it also feels it's a little more illuminating to hear like the back and forth that usually happens before an idea reaches rest.
Yeah, so one big thing that went a long way, which I don't know if we've detailed a lot in our articles, is this // So this went through a lot of iteration. Particularly, this is where we landed, where you see the slash, right? That didn't exist in the game for most of the game's development. We were trying to make a contextless, or a context-sensitive action.
Yep.
And when we were trying to do that, we didn't want to have a visual on screen, because that's like part of the lameness of a lot of context-sensitive actions, is that they have a big,
You're waiting to see the word talk appear or jump, and then it doesn't feel like you're doing the action, it feels like you're waiting for a menu to accept your input.
Right, and so we wanted to get away from that kind of thing. And we wanted to create a context-sensitive action that felt like really fun, and so we were trying to avoid it. You can see, if you pay attention really closely, that Specter Knight, like, animation.
He tilts his scythe in the direction he'll go.
Right.
We also, we thought, like, well, the animation, like, Wallace is like, well, I'll make the animation really clear, we can, like, go with the scythe. We tried a few revs with that. We thought, like, well, the sound effect, like, maybe you'll hear, like, a tunk, tink, and so you'll be able to internalize that. But the sound that we ended up using is, like, much more subtle, since you hear it so frequently. But the // I think was your master stroke right here.
What, the visual?
The visual.
Well, I was harping on it for a long time, being like, we need to put in a visual, but I had no idea what the visual should be. I want to say it was Waz's idea to put like a gash in the world, essentially.
That's cool, like a tear. I think I was out that week, like I was sick or on vacation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I came back and was like, whoa, what's this? Neat. I did not put that code in.
I put that in?
You put all that code in.
No, that can't be right.
I definitely know this because when I was working on Showdown and I got to that part of the code, I'm like, what's all this? I wouldn't do it like this.
But I wouldn't do it like that either.
You did it like this.
You mean the actual visual part?
Yes, the implementation of the whole feature. That was you.
That's weird.
That's not me. That's good job. But whenever I get there, like, I don't know what this code is. Who's this? Who's this in my house?
Garbage.
Oh yeah, Mountain Dew, chug it.
That's so funny. I definitely don't remember doing that.
Well, that's what we're here to reminisce.
What was the thing the other day that happened that you were like, I didn't write that? And it turned out you really did.
If by the other day you meant like 2.5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You just had to throw that like shade all over.
I was solid, and I don't know. But yeah, guys, if you ever find yourself working on a creative or technical project and you wonder, should I use version control? The answer is yes. So that you can shame,
so you can shame yourself.
You can shame
mostly
and find out that
so you can be like, you did it, and then you find out, oh no, I did it.
Right. Oh, this was a mistake 4 years in the making, and it was at my hand. It's very exciting and fun. I hope you're all enjoying this very obviously coder-heavy program.
Yeah.
Another thing I think about with this stage is King Knight, if you can believe it. Normally we make the Plains stage like near the end of the project, but because we were trying to get both Specter Knight and King Knight going at the same time in parallel, we had King Knight playing through this stage as well as Specter Knight. And not the mobility you see today, but the King Knight mobility we thought we'd have 3 years ago.
Yeah, we wrote a big, huge article about that.
YachtClubGames.com.
That went live somewhat recently. You'll have to ignore all the presents information to get to it, but yeah, it's very cool.
And so this level had Plague Knight style alternate like level collision nudges where it's like, oh, it's a little higher so he could make his bash, it's a little lower so he could do this. But it was all playable. And I think there was a horse NPC on the first screen that's like, bash into a wall to do a spin, since we are presenting it for like internal testing.
Always Black Knight. I forgot that this one also had Black Knight in it, and when thinking through the King Knight story, it was like Black Knight's not going to be in this one. What it should not have Black Knight.
What it should have been was Magistus. She's like, halt! Yeah, you should go no further. And she throws a bomb to blow up the ground and summons a turtle. And it's like, whoa! I guess Magistus and Black Knight are both the first intro characters.
So a fun thing about here is that Terrapin, we always had the idea that Shovel Knight might have a steed, and
Black Knight would also be,
and Black Knight would have one too. Like all the characters might have one, and then we were like, okay, we were thinking about redoing all the boss battles essentially,
right? And
we thought, okay, this is like a perfect time to introduce this kind of like silly dual fight.
It works out because. As Specter Knight, you had a lot of fun targeting characters and jumping with the dash slash, and now you're sort of wrestling with the dash slash, maybe threading multiple targets and thinking about there being multiple, I don't know, directing where you want to go.
Right, yeah, and so, it's like sort of the first test of your like accuracy of like, oh, I can target a specific object, you know, among two things close to each other.
Definitely. It also allows us to reuse Black Knight's basic attacks while still feeling not like a fight you've done 100 times, which is important because we don't want it to be like a whole new character. It's like, did you know before the events of Shovel of Hope, Black Knight had like 5 cool attacks that he never used again? But by putting it with Terrapin, you know why he's not fighting like that, why he's not using that combat style. Speaking of fighting styles, could it be the first ever character where you learn their real name? Yes, it's him, Donovan.
Yep.
You guys think that any veteran characters will return in Shovel Knight Dig? Yes.
Yes.
But not...
Like Shovel Knight, for example.
Yeah, Shovel Knight will be in it.
He didn't show up in Specter of Torment.
He's been on the bench. He's like ready. And King of Cards, remember.
Oh, depending on how much...
He was so exhausted from the mirror fights in Showdown. Do other knights have canonical real names? I imagine they could, but I don't know if it's mandatory. Or if they, maybe.
Yeah, I think like someone like King Knight probably, he just goes by King Knight. Maybe he has a real name when he was like 5.
Right.
But he like...
His
really
identity
quickly,
is King Knight now.
Like those people that like change their names in college or whatever. Right. He changed his name as soon as he could name himself. So this is a fun thing. We struggled a lot with these sepia scenes, like where to put them and stuff, or like how it would work when you went to the hub.
Plot.
Yeah, and... I just got that. Got that fun.
Very nice.
So we actually this being sepia didn't go until like really late in the game actually. It was just started purple, and we thought we wanted to like condition you for this kind of idea that like he was remembering something, meaning sepia.
Right, to attach the
And then we wanted to make this little action here be even more surprising.
Another press to begin. Whoa!
Yeah.
Boo!
Because before it was just like purple, and then she showed up, and it felt like not dramatic enough, I think.
Oh, I want to. Yeah, can I have the control?
Yeah, it's your turn anyway.
So, something. Speaking of fun things that we never think about, in Shovel Knight and Plague of Shadows, the NPCs impose upon you early on that you need to press up to talk to people.
Yes, yeah.
And so, like, Farrell's in the village, he's like, well, Shovel Knight, you have a shovel. Anyway, press up to talk to everyone. And for Specter Knight, we neglected to put that in.
Well, we didn't neglect it. We talked about it a lot, and we just didn't have a good solution.
Right. It would be weird if Enchantress is like, find me 8 knights. And remember, press up to talk to
Yeah.
everyone and disappear.
We just felt like it was weird. And we thought, well, after 3, this is the 3rd game, maybe we don't need to do it anymore.
But after releasing it, we found that some people didn't.
That this was their first Shovel Knight
It was the first Shovel Knight game. So,
which is something we hoped, but we didn't actually think would happen.
So we added a feature that if you, along with King of Cards, that if you walk this far to like an important part and try leaving without ever talking to anyone, Dark Accolade has new lines localized across 8 languages where, are you leaving already? I've been practicing day and night to aid you in your mission. So there's some Dark Accolade lore, which is fun. Well, you can press up to talk to me once you're ready. And that way, now maybe hopefully you know to talk to people.
Yeah.
That's a hot tip you'll get. This hub area got redesigned pretty late in development. If you see the Specter of Torment launch-ish trailer, it looks completely different, and all the characters are in different spots.
If you ever want to know what our games look like in development,
trailers are
a great way to see that. Someone at PAX came up to me and was like, I watched the original Shovel Knight Kickstarter trailer, and boy, did that look different. It's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, we changed some stuff. I'm going to grab a curio real quick. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to spend big. All of these rooms for red are all on the same level in the tower hub. They're just in the bottom right. Yeah. So there's a grid of rooms that
That's
all have
really
these challenges in it.
And so is Horse's Tower.
So is Horse's Tower. It's, it's organized in the upper right, but it pulls all the rooms randomly in a very cool and fun way. My biggest regret about these rooms is that you don't have enough time to hear this music.
Yes.
I want to make them 10 times longer so you hear like the whole thing, but
I think this music was actually like one of the biggest. I thought it would be like a 15-second track or something. And Jake put in this like real melancholy like long thing, and it was like, it's amazing.
I hope that at least like people are like, oh, you can't even open the inventory to look at your weapons. So, man. Hey Spectre, I thank God you're here. Press A 100 times.
This like whole setup was something we talked a lot about, just how to do it. Like, I don't think anyone was really happy with it.
What, when it shipped?
Well,
or you mean during development?
During development, I think. Just because so the reason red exists is because and normally when you go through the stages, you pick up the item and we have some kind of level design that sort of can show you how to do it.
Right.
And we couldn't do that here because obviously you'd be buying it and using it. So then we thought, well, okay, let's build those out. But just the contrivance of having to like go somewhere and do this like very specific thing where you can't use your other weapons to get through it just felt really very like unusual for the game. So yeah, we spent a lot of effort trying to get that to work.
But it's an idea that worked. Oh, there we go. And we continued using it in the King of Cards, where the side areas have this little talking spot. And my Specter Knight.
Yay!
Yeah!
Something fun here, if you don't know, Creech, runs the little juice bar here, says different dialogue based on how many knights you've defeated. Like the further you go
as
through
more
the
people,
game.
when you beat knights, more bar patrons show up. They're like, wisdoms and warriors and all that. And Creech actually changes his dialogue every couple of
A big
years.
effort we were doing here was trying to make it seem like a home you were going back to a lot. We really liked how that worked in Plague of Shadows and felt like
a base.
We could like extend it to feel more like We wanted to feel like you were recruiting everyone, right? And that came with like recruiting more people in your hub too that maybe necessarily you didn't like go seek out.
It's pretty crazy because so many of the characters in here have conditional dialogue.
Oh, yes.
Compared,
yes.
But Shovel of Hope has like nothing.
Oh, another fun fact about Creech is that he has no legs.
That's true. He's just a top sprite that moves around at exactly that height.
I can't remember. He had legs, and we had to take them out for, I think, a bug reason. Is that right?
Like on 3DS, I'm sure it would like peer through the wall or
right.
it would become an issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, like all these characters, they change based on like what you recruit and how many people are there. In Shovel Knight, I think other than the Dancer and King Pridemore and the Fisherman, no one cared about what you were doing in the world and responding to it that correctly. Yeah. We always have to have this because it's just fun to reflect on where you were going. Very cool. Okay.
We love that joke.
I'm just gonna go to the next level. We can.
You're not gonna play with the Mimic?
No, we can spend some time on that.
Because I remember spending a lot of time on that.
That's great.
An absurd amount of time.
So we can go anywhere. Why don't we go to a stage?
This was a big like push for this one. We're like, but let's try to make it so it's more like the Mega Man style where you can go everywhere. We
put it together and we're like, we'll just put it in any order and people can tackle it however they want. But what happened is everyone instinctively said, where's King Knight? He's the first character. I should fight King Knight. And so...
And we knew that would happen too. So we actually somewhat intentionally made like some of those stages harder or easier or...
We made them in an order that doesn't reflect the main game. Like Mole Knight and Treasure Knight are over here.
Right.
It's like, so that way you didn't think that you're supposed to beat them from left to right, because other play testing we saw is that people, if Plains, for instance, was all the way on the left, you would assume I should proceed from left to right.
Yes.
And so we put it in the center, and we said, I don't know, make the most of it, and people had to make new info and go from there. What would you say is the level people are least likely to do first? Late Night, probably?
No, because that's towards the center. I think you might choose those center ones.
Flying Machine people go to Good Judgment Rush. Okay, I'll do Iron Whale first. But first, I'm going to find out a little bit of info.
Yeah, this is a fun thing we put in.
Treasure Knight. With his sunken riches, the tides will turn indeed. We wanted to provide a little bit more flavor.
So yeah, as you might know, Dark Reese shows up later, and that was like a big thing. Like, oh, should we write 2 of these, like for every stage?
Yes,
How do we do that?
We should write 2 lines for every stage. But since I think a big part about Specter Knight is you want to find out a little bit more about why they're a part of the Order and why you're recruiting them. So this provides...
and that's a big part of all the Shovel Knight games that we tried to differentiate from Mega Man. Mega Man, you don't know anything about the characters, right?
Right.
And Shovel Knight,
building
one
stuff?
of the reasons we have a village is sort of we have some characters that tell you about every single knight, right?
Right.
And we wanted to make sure that was the thing that got across, that I can learn a little bit more about them if I look at this, one thing.
Right. Oh, Treasure Knight is making the fishers angry? Oh, what a jerk. We should get him.
Yeah.
This object was a desire to... We had the lantern object in Plains that you saw, which is a free, fun / object. And so this idea was, well, if every level had its own lantern, what would it do? And so the idea was this should follow the rising and lowering tide, a new feature of Specter of Torment.
Fun fact here is that the way the background works, it's actually a layer that's going on top of it. See how it looks bluer, right? To make it look like it's in water. That was this new tech that we had to add for this, and it was really impossible. We spent a long time figuring out, because normally when the water's still, we actually have 2 different backgrounds that are drawn by Woz, and they're just stamped down in the stage. But here they have to be swapped out on the fly.
In real time.
Yeah.
When I see this beach tile set and I'm moving these orbs around, I think of Little Mermaid on NES.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, that's we're doing it.
For some reason that doesn't come to my mind, but that's definitely correct.
It's definitely. If you've never played that, it's made by Capcom, and it's quite cool.
It is very cool.
Nice.
A fun thing, so since the water's moving up and down, a lot of the enemies were made to go in and out of water, like the eel. A lot of that already existed. If you played Shovel of Hope, for some reason some things could get out of water or get into the water, and we spent time, adding those little fun tidbits.
Right.
But in here it was a real serious thing.
It actually got put to its paces. Yeah. Same thing with a blob who touches fire will catch on fire.
Right.
There's a lot of like small touches that maybe didn't see
what's
the
it
light
called?
there.
Our chemistry system.
Alchemy engine.
Or alchemy engine, right?
Which is not a real thing.
That's the joke we made.
If you
I was gonna probably say the same thing.
if you haven't read it yet, Alec put together a comprehensive level design article about making rooms in all of Specter of Torment, including this one. It's a 5-part series that's filled with GIFs and images, and
It's very
I
comprehensive.
highly recommend
If
reading it.
if you're curious at all about how we design levels, it really goes in depth.
If you make Mario Maker stages, it might be something fun that you could take with you. If you make games of any type, I hope it's a little insightful.
So a fun thing about these graps is that they always had this movement code in there. From the very beginning, graps we didn't really know what it was when we put it in. We just thought it'd be fun to have that kind of enemy in there. So he used to shoot bullets out of his eyes, and he used to move around, but we didn't use the bullets and moving around in Shovel Knight proper because once we put them in there, it got reduced. The places that he was in the game, and then here we got to use it again because it made
Great
sense. When we were making this stage, it became really apparent that the slow gravity was really fun with the dash slash and really made you be able to choose more specifically where to go. So then being able to move made a lot of sense that you would be really timing another element.
Bit about chat. In case anybody has questions or something. We had some earlier, but
Is Yacht Club reading the chat? We're trying to talk about our memories, so sorry. We'll definitely we should have some questions.
We'll take some
or something.
timeouts.
Yeah.
Sure. You guys got questions? This is level design giggles endlessly about this set of
So
videos.
a joke that came about, that I brought up from people say this game is inspired by DuckTales a lot, and we actually weren't. But one major way we were is I played DuckTales because I was working on DuckTales Remaster at the same time. And one thing DuckTales has a lot is double secrets, meaning you find a secret, and then within the secret there's another secret. And I think that was a case of where we put 8 of them in a row, and it makes us laugh.
Well, because it's it keeps going, and then there's a chest, but there's not a lot in it. But then a eel appears behind you, making it the ultimate secret,
Right.
and so it just keeps going and keeps going. What levels did you enjoy working on the most? We were both programmers, so we were all involved with all levels,
but not designing them in a fun.
Right, so that's probably, unfortunately, not something we could super field. For programming, if you could imagine it, we put in, it's okay, we're going to work on Iron Whale as a team, and we get the spec for how the enemies should behave or the object should work, like the rising water or this fish. We put it in, and then we go and do something else and find out 2 weeks later that it needs to work entirely differently. Or it needs a few nudges to work how the designer was envisioning it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that could be sitting down and talking through problems, but frequently level design team usually finesses it.
Something fun here is that we really changed up this bottom layout.
Right, rather than making it centered.
Right, which was we always try to do something with the anglerfish there, and always struggle to do something.
This is iconic.
It was really.
Why did you decide to make birders major characters
Birders major characters.
in King of Cards?
I
think that's part of celebrating the lore of the series.
Yeah, well, I think birders have always sort of been appealing to everyone.
We love birders.
Well, we when they went in, I remember I was like, "This is weird," right? It's like a flashing bird. What? It doesn't make any sense. And I think oftentimes when someone doesn't like something at Yacht Club, we all pile in to love it.
Right.
And then it becomes overblown to the point where it's okay, now we're making a main character out of it.
Well, I tried to parry that projectile.
Nice.
Which is a showdown feature. It wasn't day one, it's we're going to make a birder boss. But
No.
we had the enemy in there, and then, in Specter of Torment, we have the birder around
Right.
the mace, and then
So it
like
just-
the statues appear.
Yeah, the
and it
love
kinda
just
builds
keeps.
up.
Yeah, it just keeps growing.
No, I didn't do it.
It's like, which enemy should we pull? We should pull the birder. That's like a cute one to pull.
Right.
It could fly around differently.
It's like you don't start with King Boo.
And then like, what would a birder's character be? It's like, I don't know. And then when we come up with the birder's character, then it's like, well, this is too good. We should keep going
Oh,
with it.
I'm terrible. Yeah, and it's a fun way to build it out. It's like arriving at King Boo or a giant Goomba, or what Goombas would be like.
Right.
And that was fun to figure out. But we also have a secret love for it because when Shovel Knight shipped on Steam, the original Shovel Knight, you could have like 4 emoticons as part of the trading cards. And we made Shovel Knight, Specter Knight, Plague Knight, King Knight, and Birder. So I guess more than 4. And so for some reason, we always had a soft spot.
Is it true that Shovel Knight can canonically defeat Kratos? I mean,
They can go toe-to-toe.
Corey Barlog said that it was all canonical. So.
I mean, they both walked away as equals, I imagine it.
Yeah.
No
I don't think
one was
he
defeated.
wrecked him, and Kratos was like, I could never defeat this
Right.
guy.
Oh, it's over. I should really
Yeah.
think about myself. Plus, we don't know what happened because in God of War, I think 2016, he got a bunch of new powers and runes. So I think Shovel Knight would have a hard time. If I had my +6 axe, things would be different. Oh wait, I have the death touch.
Oh yeah, this is a fun tidbit.
Yeah. That's the only sub-weapon that can defeat Lipsalon or whatever we call it. Lipsalon was
that was definitely a tough name. What is his name? Chandra? No.
Not Chandra. It's like Lunkarov.
Oh, Lunkarov. Yeah, that's it. When did you guys start working on Cyber Shadow? We started 2 years ago, but Arne, the original developer, started 7, I want to say.
It's an intense labor.
How
of
long has
love.
Pocket Dungeon been in development? About a year or so. How did you react to the Just Toys and Beats remixes when you first heard them? I mean, they're awesome. That Just Beats, the whole DLC is just really incredibly cool.
You should pitch it.
So Just Shapes and Beats, if you haven't played it, is like a music rhythm game where you're essentially dodging like a bullet hell kind of thing. That's like the combo mashup, cool mashup, and the addition, free DLC to the game, which is Just Shapes and just Shovels and Beats.
Yep. Just Shovels and Knights.
Just Shovels and Knights. That's
Mixtape
right.
2.
A good name too. They did 4 stages where they remixed Shovel Knight songs and had incorporated like the boss fight elements, like when you're fighting Specter Knight, you're doing Specter Knight's remix. There's lots of Specter Knight stage elements and hazards and things from the boss fight you recognize.
They're delightful.
It's very fun.
You can unlock them normal progression-wise through the game, but if you have the Shovel Knight amiibo on Switch, you can unlock them instantly. And bitch. But also give it a look. It's really great. Someone asked how difficult was it to make Showdown canonical. It was definitely an undertaking. The idea of creating as many characters as we did and having meaningful dialogue exchanges and a plot element that didn't unseat everything in the game but still brought the story forward and made the characters under a new light was definitely a huge focus that took some real doing. But I'm glad we did it. I'm glad when you play each game, you want to learn a little bit more about all the characters, and I think Showdown is a great vector to do so. Any plans for online Showdown or Justice? Nope. Shovel Knight wasn't made with network play in mind, and we don't have plans to introduce it. We're also done with it. We're not going to make any more Shovel Knight updates.
It's the last patch.
We got to make new games. So you'll notice now in the corner, that bright yellow pixel on the left, that's actually the Iron Whale sub come up to surface.
That's the magic wasp touch right there.
So as you complete more and more boss fights, the background will light up because you'll see across the valley that the power is coming online for the Enchantress.
Oh, my turn. Alright, what should I do?
I don't know.
Should I do some...
Do some sick tricks.
Oh, I'm ledge for mine. You think you do oil up in the oil? We always have a hedge farmer like character in all the campaigns.
Right, and so
where you get to show off your skills.
I think this was because we loved the rail grinding so much that we wanted there
Yes.
to be a place where you could do it effortlessly and just have fun. And so this is kind of like a little skate park that's just set up where you can kind of just do cool tricks, have fun. It's also a great way to test fairies and grinding. Were there any night ideas that got scrapped? Not really. We make the level themes first, then the characters that inhabit them. So we knew we wanted to make like a volcano stage, an underwater stage, and an explosion-based stage, and we'd make the characters next. So we did not have design sitting on the cutting room floor like that. But if you check out the Shovel Knight art book, you can see some earlier revisions. Tinker Knight was a little taller, Plague Knight had a different mask design. There's like, Specter Knight had a skull mask. We had some, you know, they went through different iterations before we arrived on what we did. Funny to see you here. I was streaming Batman Brave and the Bold yesterday.
Whoa!
Nice. Were you playing it the DS one or the Wii one? I guess, yeah, it's also WayForward's 30th anniversary.
Yes.
So happy
cool.
happy anniversary to
Happy
WayForward. That's fun that it's 3rd Specter Night and 30th WayForward.
Yeah.
That's a cool set of circumstances. Just so you know, David worked on Batman Brave and the Bold DS, and I worked on Brave and the Bold Wii.
I worked on the Wii one too, but I did sound for it.
You did sound. Created the sound assets. The Wii one, nice! I'm glad you like it. Or I hope you like it, but I'm glad you played it.
So yeah, if you don't know, these little eggs here. Oh no, I blew
Oh,
it.
you lost it.
Which we established are birder eggs.
Yes, these are birder eggs.
Speaking of birder lore, I guess we do love birders.
Yes. Yeah, you can get some fun money in.
What's with the dragon gold armor? So, as part of the hub design, we wanted to create characters that would have delightful characters like this, where you would find maybe different ways to interact with them, or ways you'd want to interact with them over and over again because of how endearing or just enjoyable it is. And we also wanted characters like we talked about with Creech, where when you came back each time, something seemed a little different or something was progressing. And so we originally had a gold armor in here because I think the idea of speaking with a direct enemy sprite for me is like very compelling. If like in Mario RPG, if you walk in and find like that guy who runs the casino, it's like, oh, that's a guy, I fought him as a boss, but now he's just here talking as an NPC. So having a gold armor here was cool, but when we were thinking about what he should say, we imagined, or I think at the time I imagined, that you fight gold armors in all the stages, and so it'd be fun to hear the plight of a gold armor that's learning the ins and outs of the Order too. Yeah. And so he's like, I'm gonna go sign up with Tinker Knight. Oh, he sucks. I'm gonna go sign up with Treasure Knight. And also to go through all the designs of the different paladin gold armors. I thought it was a fun look at their maybe a potential backstory.
What should we do next?
All is all yours.
Go with Tinker Knight.
Go for it.
This mirror went through a lot of iteration. The visual effect for it
Sure, yeah.
was like we wanted it to look like a character like in the mirror, but that's not easy to do with NES stuff.
Are all gold armors dragons? No. I think that's maybe particular to that gold
That's
armor.
one character.
That's just his life and his lot in life. Why a dragon? I think
that originally came from a Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter, you got your portrait in the game, and someone wanted a dragon
right
as their character,
as their portrait, and so he appears.
And then Waz drew for fun like gold armor as a dragon, I think.
Yes.
And then for the longest time we were like, I mean, just it felt silly to be a real enemy in the game, but Waz really wanted it in the game.
Basically, every time we were talking about new enemies, Waz was like, "You should put that Dragon Knight in,"
Right?
And like he would breathe fire, and we're like, "Okay, we know you love the Dragon Knight."
And then what actually happened next was, I don't know if you remember this order, but that it went into Showdown next, before Specter of Torment.
As a surprise for Waz.
As a surprise for Waz.
We added alternate palettes, and we added new
Ian and I were like,
costumes.
we can figure out how to put costumes into Showdown, and we'll put gold armor, and that will like make Waz's
put in the dragon
life.
So we're like, hey, here's a new build. Everyone should check it out. And I'm like, Waz, you should check out the 5th color for gold armor.
Yeah.
And he was very excited to see that it was.
And then when that happened, I think it like naturally made its way into Specter of Torment as like the reward.
Retroactively.
Yeah.
That actually happens for a good.
So many things happen.
A good number of features happened in Showdown and then propagated backwards into the games, such as Dark Reese.
Such as Dark Reese!
The reason Dark Reese exists in Specter of Torment is because when we were doing like early design and dialogue for what we wanted to see out of Showdown, well before, after Plague of Shadows, before Specter Night, we always joked about how that it would be really cool to have Reese and Dark Reese as selectable characters. Similar to
because like playing Smash, having Dark Pit, that just always made us laugh.
Pit and Dark Pit. It's like, oh yeah, well I get what he is, and like that's cool. And we're like, oh yeah, maybe like Dark Reese is on the Showdown select screen.
Right.
And then, but we wanted to do the work and make it a canonical fit and a reason. And so now Dark Reese is relaunched. What does your boss moveset design process look like? Why don't you go first?
Well, that's a. So typically we like come up with the characters first, like what their art looks like, what they, who they are as a character, like all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll all like brainstorm together, like what kind of boss is this? Like jumping around boss, or like what are people's, some really very, very loose ideas of what the boss can be. And then we'll like sort of be like, maybe like whoever's designing it, typically Sean in this case, since he's designing everything, will like work with the programmer that's usually going to put it in to like say like, oh, here's like, do these 4 moves make sense together, kind of thing. Like I'm thinking about like this, and this, and this. Does that work? Like, what do you think? Will that be interesting? Will you be able to like bounce off their head and like totally destroy the battle? And after that, then like, Sean will go and like write down what he thinks will work, right? And then everyone will look at it after that, like the programming team and the art team, to be like, does this check out as like what we want to do for the boss? And if that's like yes, then we'll like go ahead. And from there, like, then, it'll get animations made, and after that happens, it'll get put in the game. And usually, like, putting it in the game, there'll be, like, a billion more ideas that happen. Because usually we write down, like, here's the 4 attacks that will happen, but, like, how those moves connect is not written at all.
It's not like, this will create projectiles that make you want to jump, but this will take over you not wanting to jump.
Right. So a lot of, like, the design of the movement of the characters and how they're going in between those attacks and stuff is like really on the gameplay programming at that point. And after that, then it's like in, and everyone looks at it and gives a bunch of feedback.
Sometimes attacks end up being harsher than we expect, so we ease up. Sometimes an attack's not effective, so we like tweak it so it is.
Yeah.
Usually that means adding shockwaves to a ground attack.
Right.
That's like the go-to.
Yeah, and then then it's in and everyone's happy with it here, and then we'll usually have people like play it, and when they play it, they're like, oh, they just find this way too hard.
Right. Oh, Specter Knight's too hard.
Yeah.
Lego Lantern's asking how he could contact us with fan art and fan designs. We'd love to take a look. If you want to send it to support@yachtclubgames.com through email, that's the best way to reach us. Sorry to jump in.
So these lizard clockwork enemies were originally from a different stage. I think they were they Polar Knight?
They were, I don't remember if they were Polar Knight, but just so everyone knows, they were not mechanical. They looked like organic.
They looked like lizards.
Right.
And when we whatever stage it was, I think it was Polar Knight, had too many objects in it. Or like when we designed the stage, it felt like we didn't need them. Right. But Clockwork Tower felt like it didn't have enough. This is like actually a rare instance of this kind of thing happening. And we were just like, well, let's just put them in the Clockwork Tower and we'll add gears to them.
In retrospect, it works because they move on a set. They move like in a clockwork fashion.
Yeah, they move very machine-like.
It's like it works.
It made a lot of sense. But yeah, it's that's not a very common occurrence when we're making stages.
People are saying they're from We have a lot of different answers. Were there any knights you were hoping would win in the playable character poll? I would say not really.
No.
For us,
The only thing we were
dreading
hoping,
large characters.
Yes, we were dreading large characters, but other than that, we were like, everything will work. Fine.
So we're glad that people chose the smaller or more humanoid characters, and less the polar knights. That we
I've been like struggling with the like Specter Knight this entire time, and I'm just realizing now because it's like slightly different than Showdown.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, like one thing, I thought it was the Switch control. I'm not used to playing on this controller.
Right.
So I thought it was that, but it's not that. I'm just
Used to the super high climb.
I mean, it's partly that, but it's the combo of the two. This is one of my favorite encounters.
This is very, very cool battle bar.
Something I always wanted in the original game, which we didn't do, is I wanted like a low ceiling fight with a gold armor, which I think we were. Sean was like opposed to designing because he didn't want you hitting your ceiling when you jumped. Hitting your head on the ceiling when you jumped. But here, like Specter Knight has a lower jump, and having these gears combined with them made it so you can't jump, right?
So you have to contend with the shield blocking.
So it was like finally a thing I wanted to see for so long.
Why did you make the family portrait so expensive in King of Cards? We added that after New Game Plus was complete because we wanted there to be a payoff for obtaining max gold. We thought it was fun to get the multiplier up and to see how much gold you could rake in, but we wanted there to be like a final cherry on top for what you could allocate. So you had something to work towards.
So this is an interesting object that. So switches are a thing. This is like what I would consider a switch too. Something that's like you turn it on and off, right? That we put in every single game. Sean is always like, I wanted to put a switch in, and I'm always like, it's gonna get cut from the stage, but I'll put it in because he always ends up cutting it because he doesn't know how to use switch. Like he's like
too boring.
He's never good at doing like puzzle like things because he doesn't like. I think typically he's like adverse to like waiting or like.
It's a hard sell
time
in an action
elements,
game.
so it's hard for an action thing, and I think he like struggles with it. But Alec, who we brought on for this game, is like really, really good at figuring out how to put them in action context.
It works well with this because it sets a timer, so it's more like the book timer in Pride War, where you're like setting up a gauntlet where Specter Knight greatly excels. So we were thinking about what do I want to do? I want to jump on this, jump on this.
So it was fun to see these like come back in a way. Those wrenches were designed to work with like a lot of things in the game, surprisingly, because that's just like setting up generic code.
Was Tinker Knight always intended to have a mech? Yep. Even in the very first Shovel Knight trailer, Tinker Knight was revealed with his mech.
Sorry, everyone.
So to talk more about bosses, another thing for me when I work on a boss, and I think for you too, is there's usually a paradigm choice, even if unintentionally, about whether it's a pattern fight or like an organic fight.
Oh, definitely.
To give you an idea, like I worked on Black Knight and Specter Knight as two bosses, and for Specter Knight, he kind of goes back and forth and does set actions that you have to respond to.
Oh yeah, you gotta go.
And you gotta get the gear over to
Right.
But Black Knight, he like when you hit him, he bounces back. He like begins attacks on like what feels like on intermittent times, and there's tells to them, but it feels a little bit more organic. And I think that's usually where I start off on a lot of boss fights. It's whether this is a pattern you're digesting or whether this is like supposed to feel like a player versus player battle where you're going back and forth. Sometimes characters are very like Tinker Knight, the mech boss. It's like, well, this should feel very mechanical. This should feel like a set number of attacks. And I think providing both have a strong case. And
I think it provides variety to have both too.
Definitely. Mole Knight is another like pattern-based one. He's like, gonna do this.
Yeah. And when that is the case, I think a lot of like what I'm thinking about is how to make it feel random in other ways.
Definitely.
So like, oh, his pattern's very fixed, right? But maybe what he's like when he's aiming at you, that can be more random, or it's like player-based randomness where it like depends where the player is, how they do it, so it doesn't feel like a scripted fight per se.
Yeah, I think sometimes I put major attacks on like different timer cooldowns, so you feel like, well, every couple of seconds I'm gonna get with that attack, but maybe you don't know for sure. and other
Right.
times we just attach them to random things like every third attack he's gonna retaliate.
Yeah.
And I think that's really strong because when you fight that boss multiple times, you start like digesting it and sort of figuring out the tricks, even if you can't exactly explain why or write it down in a document. You just know he's going to do that action and you can take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think at the end, like, the goal is to try to get it. I mean, one is to be fun, of course, but like two, to like make it feel like you're.
Whoa.
It's like a character. You're like, you
Right.
know,
This is
contending
how Mole
against.
Knight fights.
Right. So having those differences, I think, help like define what the character is. Like, you know, Plague Knight moves around really sporadically and wildly, and you know, like that's sort of in line with his character.
Right. And Polar Knight stomps around and like trudges towards you slowly before exploding.
Fun fact is that if you don't know, that Tinker Knight always speaks in monosyllabic, which means you know, one syllable words.
What are you, some kind of ghost? Get out of
And
my
writing
shop.
his
I have work to do.
Writing his dialogue is always extremely challenging.
Although sometimes for proper terms, he needs multiple syllables, but we try to avoid it. But whenever he speaks about mechanical things, he goes overly verbose.
Yes.
So he's like, my calculations must have been miscalibrated. That's when he's allowed to break that. Ha, you may be a tool, but I am not. Time to make short work of you. So next time you think about Tinker Knight talking, think about monosyllabic speech patterns.
A lot of these like dialogues too, we were trying to think like, well, what's like their purpose in the order, right? That's like what Specter Knight should be like sort of contending with. Like, or you should get some kind of information out of that from their dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, he's the mechanical guy. We need a mechanical guy in our team.
Look, the Specter Knight Fairy summoned a skeleton helper for the boss. That's how far the madness goes. And now they're all going to celebrate.
Oh,
he died.
This is like one of the most challenging boss fights to balance, I would say, in the history of Shovel Knight.
That you worked on.
That I worked on. Yes, correct. The reason is because we wanted to do this big auto-scrolling thing with pits, but this also like couldn't be the last. It's, you know, you could go to any boss at any time, so people would boot up this game and go right into Tinker Knight, and this is the thing they had to like. They had to learn how to fight a boss and also do this, which is a big challenge. So figuring out all these patterns and how to complicate it and make it so people weren't always falling in the pits was a real challenge. Trying to like line these up so they like always provided a way that you could like, you know, climb the wall and like, you know, be safe, but also be a thing that it's like, oh, I'm looking for a platform. It's still like a challenge to the boss. Was very hard.
Someone asked if other knights have speech tics and patterns. I would say we try to make all the characters have a unique voice, and some of that just comes from being like a little more haughty or a little more like, you know, casual, but
or like the things they care about,
right?
You know, being
Mole Knight cares about like getting back to work, but also he's like kind of, you know, foreman like in nature, things like that. Do you have ideas in your head for the next Shovel Knight game? Yeah, we pitch like where the adventure could go or where the characters could go pretty regularly, whether it's at lunch or like what we should do next, kind of a thing.
But nothing like very solid, I would say. You know, once we start actually making it, then we like actually come together and figure that out. Whoa, I'm going to a sepia scene! So this was actually one of the initial things we wanted to do with the game. We thought, oh, it'd be fun to have like a sepia scene before we even knew what the story would be.
Right. We
thought it'd be fun to like have this kind of like, I'm in a sepia place, and what could that mean? We didn't know.
Someone keeps asking if the Game Grumps bit with Creech was funny. Whatever you're referring to I don't know.
I don't remember that
so
either.
I guess I can't comment on that. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Because this is the 3rd year anniversary.
Yeah, so Luan, you know, he came out of this, like, so we want to do sepia scenes, which to us meant, oh, we have to do something in the past. And then we thought, oh, well, you know, Specter Knight should have, like, a person, like, that you see a new character that, like, you can recognize as something that's not in the present, right? Well, you should be playing anyway, right?
I mean, depends how you want to handle it.
Okay, I'll do CPU.
Yeah, just like tales of past adventures, an intriguing character you want to, like, you don't know about. That's not one of the 8 knights, and a human character that isn't a knight again.
So something fun about the sepia, since we're programmers, we'll talk about a programming thing, obviously. But sepia was like, this kind of tech was new. In Shovel Knight, you can palette things, which means the short version is what you get out of it is that you can have like different colored characters, right? And we can do that with backgrounds too. But we didn't palette everything in the game, so not everything in the game could do that, and we had to add new support. So essentially, everything you see could be turned into sepia, right? Sepia colors, and that was a fun adventure of figuring out how to actually like retrofit all those things.
If I'm correct, this was a nightmare on 3DS, right?
Yes. Well, and it was like
a completely different solution.
Different platforms had to have different solutions because the way we were doing paletting was already different on different platforms.
Right, and so it's like, well, on 3DS it can handle this, but if we needed to palette everything, we'd have to do something completely different.
Yeah.
And then flash forward 3 years, here we are.
And the solutions couldn't involve you like updating every asset in the game because we didn't want there to be a huge patch.
Code Jackup asks if there's a code to make the entire game sepia. No, because there's so much work involved.
I think there is a code to make these scenes not be sepia.
Yes, but the backgrounds are gray and the characters are vibrant. It's
Correct.
like there's a lot of manual work that goes into.
But you can see the real colors of these sprites, which is true fun.
There's a lot of work that goes into making it work, and so it's not just a switch we can flip on for the rest of the game.
And figuring out what was sepia and not was actually always another big challenge, right? Like when I pause, that's not the pause button. Or when I pause, I can't pause right now. But normally when you pause, it's like not in sepia, and you might have noticed the saving prompt was not in sepia too.
Right. It's bright and vibrant.
Yeah. So we had to figure out that like UI elements wouldn't be sepia, which is a whole other challenge too.
Will Treasure Trove ever be on iOS? Not sure. We'd want to make sure that it plays well and you can actually play through it. But we don't have any platforms to announce today. We're just playing through Specter Torment.
Now that you can use controllers on everything, it's like more intriguing to us. But before it was hard to commit to it because
imagine Touch Plague Knight.
Touch Plague
Touch First Plague Knight.
Or Touch Shovel Knight is just like really impossible.
It's a big ask. Some people are still mastering pressing down to shovel drop, and on a Switch.
Yeah, we love having the game be everywhere possible, but we don't want you to have like an inferior experience playing it. But who knows? One day kids might be so good at playing with their fingers on a screen that it makes sense.
I would say the lantern, the barrier, and shield objects always get the most iteration.
Yes.
Because I'm so desperate to make them valuable.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, well, you can't just be invincible. We already did that with the phase locket. It's got to have like a cool extra effect. And so that's why this comes with like leveling up and like a barrier and being able to shoot it out at multiple levels. We just really
and I think people
like
inherently don't want to use the defensive thing, right? So how do we make the defensive thing feel more offensive is like often what happens.
I think King Knight's cape having a little bit of mobility like trick to it.
So
and
this is a joke that we had in the original Shovel Knight, Shovel of Hope. We wanted to have a character that you tipped. Like you gave money to, and the joke was that you would tip them and nothing would happen. And we were like, well, let's put that tipping idea in as like a real thing.
I think Pokemon X and Y came out recently, so the one that has tipping and it doesn't do anything. So that might have been
really.
Yeah.
You can. It's like you buy a restaurant lemonade and you can tip 300. And everyone's like, wait, maybe it affects your like Poke Rust rate or your shiny rate, and the answer was nothing. Oh man, so many costumes. We'll pick a different armor each level. I'll start with the one that, there we go. Striker Shawl allows you to hold Y to charge and attack.
Whoa, so cool.
The reason it does that effect is because in every other Shovel Knight game, the charge time is consistent. The amount of time for Plague Knight to charge his burst and King Knight to charge his super armor dash is the same. But this one, it was too powerful to let you have a full point of damage, so I delayed it to make it a little bit longer. It's like twice as long, and so the effect is there to like let you know a little bit more about how long it takes. It's a little bit overkill now that I think about it. In Shovel Knight, the charge armor would slow you down, so you couldn't like walk and use it. But for Shovel Knight, we thought that the armor's having a downside was a bit much, or that was an upgrade.
Well, that was or it was a Shovel Knight thing.
Right, it's like maybe that's a Shovel Knight thing. And so for Specter Knight, slowing him down would be like a death sentence. But yeah, so that's like where this armor kind of landed. I think in the long run, people don't like to use it. Where's the fairy? He's right there.
Oh my
Oh my god,
So
adorable.
cute.
He's in the little Horus helmet. All right.
So this is everyone's most experienced part of the game.
We were surprised.
What we were biggest thing I remember about this is one just I mean it went in very late.
The tech went in early, but actually like the level design
Right.
set up.
So it wasn't like a thing until very late in the game, and not really a thing most of us like played a lot of. Right.
Right.
It wasn't a major part of our development experience, I guess. But when the game came out, it was the #1 thing people talked about.
Definitely.
Like to the point where IGN reviewed it, and that was like almost exclusively their review was about how good this part of the game was.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So it was like it was a big shock to us, because I mean, while we all spent a fair amount of time on it and loved it, it wasn't like we spent 95% of our development time on
I
the rest
wasn't
of the
hanging
game.
my hat on it.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because levels receive such a great amount of attention in the game of Shovel Knight. And so for a level designer, they would probably rather reevaluate Stranded Ship rather than like add 3 more rooms to the climbing tower room.
Right.
So we tinkered with it and added new ideas and support, but it wasn't like something where we're like, yeah, 100% done, move on. The reason it exists is usually for our mini games, they're educational. The reason Shovel Knight's flask spinning game with Mona is in there is because we wanted players to get used to the idea of jumping and attacking.
Right.
And that game, when you wait for the flask to land, it takes too long. So you're incentivized to jump and attack. For Specter Knight, we wanted you to get used to climbing and dash slashing, and so we kind of pulled it in a lot of things. But it really is about ascending and going as high as you can. I think it's about 16 rooms that can be stacked in any order that have different difficulty ratings. It's like, I think there's level 1, 2, and 3 rooms. And so it goes like 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3. Oh, and I die. And then near the end, I think you get like 3, 2, 3 near the end to ramp up the challenge. They can be flipped on X. So sometimes you go left and right for the same thing, which just adds... Putting that in was a great time save because it made it feel like 100 times different. But other than that, there's nothing like... There's not a random chance for a jellyfish to appear where it doesn't before. It's pretty static. If you were mastering this and playing it every day, you could see the first 3 tiles and say, I know exactly what this challenge will be. But I think it turned out great.
Yeah. It's
Oh, yeah.
everyone's favorite thing.
I'm gonna beat it this time. Oh no, oh no.
The gems could increase too, right? There's elements that could be different in the rooms, right?
I don't think so.
All these gems are small at the bottom and bigger when they go up, right?
I don't
Or is that just part level 1, 2, 3?
I think that's the difficulty. Oh shit, no! Yeah, I did it. That was close. Sorry for my language.
The idea of stitching rooms together is not something that existed in Shovel Knight's Tech 2 that Ian had to put together. And the background is dynamically coming in too, right?
It is, yeah. The cool thing about the Shovel Knight engine is that you can do things like that. I was surprised when it worked. Because it's like, well, when you get this high, you pull in this and spawn everything above it. And it's like, wow, there it is. It's just working. Since it's just down to the metal like that, it's easy to manipulate and move things around and make things happen on whim, which is great. Although there were issues with flipping the spawn points, making things work. The camera is unique in that it doesn't.
Yeah, that was a big struggle with this, was getting the camera, because we don't have an up and down room in Shovel Knight where the camera scrolls. So just have how does that work where it feels fun with this game and also isn't weird and confusing?
It had support for it. You can see in the original Kickstarter there was a vertical room.
Yeah.
But we decided we hated it, and so we never used it. And so this made it more of a gameplay mechanic. Oh no.
In your opinion, who should be the true Fairy King?
Horus.
Horus!
He's the best.
There's no Horus Fairy.
There's not.
That says,
There is a horse fairy though. I'm the worst. Why am I using the joystick?
How did you come up with the motivations for the knights in the campaigns? That's a very complicated.
Oh.
Basically, I would say the quick answer is by talking about it a lot with everyone. Generally, I would say we're trying to figure out the goals of the game. You know, Specter of Torment should be a game about like looking cool, doing cool things. Oh yeah.
Another design about the tower. Sorry.
Go for it.
Yeah. Is again the goal of Specter. Wait, hold on. So glad this made it into the end product.
Yeah, me too. I remember when you put that in, you were like, David, you have to look at that. Like, you have to.
This is hilarious.
This is hilarious, and I was like, okay, yeah. You know, it jumped out at me as. It was funny how subdued it was, I guess. I mean, that's like sort of the joke.
That's the joke, and that's Horace's character.
But like how much you built it up, like almost played into the joke.
Yes.
Of it.
Especially because you're sweating so much and putting so much work into reaching it. For a little bit more extra Horace, to give you an idea for where I think the writers come from when they're talking about Horace for Sean and Jake and I think everyone here, we usually picture Horace as like the forlorn knight in Dark Souls.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure you wrote all these lines.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm pretty sure.
Like we imagine the first guy you see in Dark Souls at the bonfire, he's like, oh, another hollow, eh?
Yeah.
Well, good luck out there. We imagine Horace is kind of like quiet like that too. Ah, I bid you a pleasant journey then. Here my games and I shall sit.
Yeah.
And you like walk away and trudge. Another part about the tower, and then we'll move on, is again, the goal of the whole tower hub in general was that you would keep coming back to it and chip away a little bit more at it each time.
Yeah.
And so we imagined that when you reached Horace's challenge, you would go, oh, that's tough. I'll come back later when I'm more skilled.
Right.
And so
we thought maybe you would get the abilities, and those would help you do it too.
Oh, with the rail mail or more health or more magic or this heirloom. And so you would use it as a measuring stick. And maybe by the end of the game, you would say, oh, I fully mastered Specter Knight. I have fully mastered the tower. I can move on. But what happened was
people went straight to it.
They beat planes. They somehow magnate to it immediately, and then they're like, "I have to sit here, and this is my life now. I'm going to be 10 hours in on this tower." But the cool thing is, a lot of people do beat it, and then they take their skill back into the game.
It's great.
And they're
just
completely mastered it. So. Engine questions.
Do you guys think a mobile Joustus multiplayer app is too far-fetched? No, I don't think that's too far-fetched. I think that'd be cool. But I think us making it is too far-fetched. So if you know someone that would love to make that, let us know. What are the engine questions you're talking about?
Over Twitch. People ask me about like.
Why don't you just say it? Say it. Read it.
They're asking about what our engine is. And then what if there's any framework you guys use?
No particular. It's all custom C++. We use OpenGL, I think, on PC for rendering, but we use like the direct APIs on all the consoles, and we use Box 2D for physics. Although really we don't.
We override a lot of it.
We almost overrode all of it. And we probably wouldn't use it again just for this.
Just for the needs of our game.
Yeah, we put it in before we knew what we were making, so that's sort of where that came from.
In addition, yeah, a lot of other libraries and things like that. Well, like the tools and such. We reference all in the credits, which is like tiled for level editing, although we have a lot of custom code in there. ProMotion or pixel art, things like that. Oh. Nice and old.
What is the Shovel Knight engine called? It doesn't have a name. We typically call it the Shovel Knight engine.
That seems to work, since that's what you used and that's what we used, and we all understand what it is. And a bit more health, so we can just kind of face roll more enemies.
What is King Knight's role in the order? The Enchantress is the true ruler, so what does that make King Knight? I mean, that's sort of the joke of it, I would say. I would say his role is like...
He's the buffer between the people and the Enchantress. Like, if people are upset with what's going on in the kingdom, they talk to King Knight, and they realize that he can't get anything done.
Yeah, well, and he's sort of... I mean, in some ways, he's like the... the like leader of the order. Like he's like the, you know, like when he like speaks up for everyone, right?
He's loud. Yeah, he'll demand
Yeah.
something that he wants.
Like when they're hanging on the chain, he's the one who talks.
Right. I imagine if the order wasn't getting paid, like from the Enchantress, or their needs weren't being met, King Knight would be the first to complain out loud.
Yeah,
Because
he's the complainer.
Right. He's like, we should have matching uniforms, and everyone's like, okay. Go in the Specter Knight's secret room here.
If your question is if something is canon, the answer is always yes.
Usually yes. I'm Specter Knight. If you saw our old Shovel Knight build stream available on YouTube, you would know this is a long-running joke we had internally that we hoped to make real.
Yeah, and we did it.
And we did it. So Super Skeleton is guarding Specter Knight's former, or like his location. You get to see a lot of colorful, cool things. If you want to find out more about this, you can ask Waz.
Yeah, Waz has like internal logic for every little piece of art here and why it's here, and always reveals none of that to the rest of the team.
But we're programmers, so we're moving on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it looks so cool when you use this in the dark.
Oh yeah, it does.
Pretty rad.
Don't remember that. This is the trailer. That's what I think of this room being.
These enemies are new for Specter of Torment. The design impetus behind it was that Specter Knight can deal a lot of damage all at once. We need a character that can take a lot of hits and be like a real stopper so that you can unload DPS or really have to contend with what he's got.
And their hit reaction is actually really different.
It's unique. They have like
Yeah.
hit stop, like a fighting game kind of thing. Yeah, it's a one-off. I think it works in making them feel really persistent. And the reason that hit stop is there so that they don't, you know, interrupt you when you're doing a bunch of dash slash combos.
A full-fledged game based off birder. That'd be great. Like maybe like you take care of like a birder nest.
Right.
You have to like raise them and like feed them. Or it could be like a Flappy Bird kind of thing, where they're like going in angles, and you're like you gotta like tap when they're like have to switch angles, and you're like it's impossible. Ooh, nice, good trick.
Just letting everyone know the lantern's really good and you should all use the lantern, and we all love the lantern.
Are there any genres you would never create a game for? I don't think so.
No, I'd be interested in tackling quite a number of genres.
Would you ever consider making an updated version of the art book? I think we would love to make an art book that has all the other games in them. Since the first one didn't really go into Plague of Shadows and King of Cards and
It
Specter.
got Plague Knight actually. Just not
Yeah, a
Spectre
little
again.
bit, but
And not Shadow.
just getting everything in there I think would be cool.
Yeah, an addendum similar to how the Mega Man art book keeps getting updated would be pretty neat.
When do you think you'll stop just making Shovel Knight? I mean,
We announced very recently during the Yacht Club Games Presents
yeah, we're making 2 new games.
2 new games, and
so one or two of those might not be Shovel Knight.
right, a new IP.
And also, we're publishing Cyber Shadow, and that is definitely not Shovel Knight. Although it has Shovel Knight fairies in
So
it.
the answer is we already are.
We already are.
But glad you're excited for it. I hope, in addition to maybe Shovel Knight.
Is Pocket Dungeon one of the 2? No, it is not one of the 2 games.
Nope, neither is Cyber Shadow.
There's Cyber Shadow, and neither is Shovel Knight Dig. They're 2 games that no one knows what they are yet.
Except us. Maybe us.
Maybe we know what we want to be making, and
We
it
have
could
some
not be
ideas.
what we end up making.
So if you use the lantern and the fire, it really powers it up.
Yeah,
Which
that's
is
a
cool
good
because
trick.
it's fire. Fire plus fire equals double
More fire.
Yeah, that's just math.
I-
I saw the original mechanics for King Knight, where he could bash through the enemy. What made you decide that every bash should respond the same way instead of killing bash be different? I thought we talked about that in the article, but maybe we didn't.
We can go through it again.
What?
Yeah, we can talk about it again.
But yeah, but the reason we made that choice is because there was just generally, I think, a lot of confusion around the bash and the spin, and we just really wanted to. At that point, since people were struggling with mobility, our best bet internally was basically just to simplify everything we could.
Here's why in another way.
Yeah.
Do you know, viewer at home, how much HP a zombie has? Do you know how much HP gold armor has? Do you know how much HP Beto has?
Specter Knight has that problem too, right? And we decided it was like okay with Specter Knight.
Specter Knight, you have time to respond to it, but
yeah.
We didn't want to make a game where you counting the HP was critical, where you had to know on the third hit I have to go right.
Yeah, King of Cards was like that movement was such a commitment, and people were struggling with it so much that we thought it would be simpler just to always have it be the same.
The difference between that and Specter Knight is in Specter Knight, if you miscalculate, you're still going up in the air, and you can climb the walls. For King Knight, if you miscalculate, that's the difference between bashing off a ledge and bashing into the air. The directions are too different, and so the punishment for you not knowing is too high. And so that's why we didn't do it. It's important to think about.
Like people are guessing the amount of health. Right?
That's good. That's that actually wasn't necessarily the point, but I like that everyone's engaged.
Maybe we should put that on our next Yacht Club Games Presents
trivia. HP of gold armor.
How would you approach developing a 3D game? The same way we would approach developing a 2D game.
Two-dimensional.
Yeah, we'd make it 2D, and then we'd develop it. No, I mean, it's the same approach. We'd just be using different tools and different skill sets. But generally, our philosophy for how we make games is the same, and that hopefully leads to the same results, whether you're in 2D or 3D.
Yeah, we focus on what kind of experience we're trying to create, whether that's exploring a 3D world or combat or sightseeing.
Any plans on releasing Shovel Knight merch? We are always releasing Shovel Knight merchandise.
Definitely.
That's what you mean.
Fan gamer, for fans by fans.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff out there, and we hope to continue to keep making new stuff.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun souping up Phantom Striker for this new fight.
Yeah, I love this.
It was great since the original Phantom Striker is a very even keel, flat terrain fight with some fun surprises. This really makes you use the climbing. It really makes you think about kind of Pac-Man style routing and where you're going to end up and what's coming down the pipe. And
hey, it's Waz.
It was. And so yeah, I really like how this fight turns out in terms of using Phantom Striker's powers, but in a new arena, but also with a few twists.
Why is King Knight so bad when his mom is so nice? I mean, that's you. Haven't you noticed? Did you ever have friends like that, or where their mom's really nice and the kid is so because of that, or not because necessarily, but they're spoiled. Despite that, they're spoiled and they take advantage of their nice mom. That's sort of how we pictured King Knight. Will we get a sequel to Shovel Knight in the future? Yeah, I mean, we're not working on one at the moment, but I think that would be cool one day for sure. Are most of the devs really good at the game? I would say most of the people involved in designing it. So whether they're programmers or level designers.
Was that question from Waz?
And I guess everyone's really good at the game, honestly.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
We've been playing it for years.
Basically, anyone that does play it as part of their development process, artists will play it. QA obviously plays it. Everyone's very good if they involve. Shannon, who's one of the developers over here that you can't see.
Hi.
She doesn't play it as part of her normal work, so is less good at it. And usually when we're trying to get oh, is this terrible or good, or is it too hard? We'll like bring in Shannon or someone, Shane, who works on the engine, and it doesn't play it as much. We'll be like, hey, can you like play this real fast for me?
But I would also say we're a small team, and so when it comes to shipping the game, a lot of times everyone helps out in playing through the game once or twice, or taking a build home and just kicking it around to see if everything's all right.
Yeah, everyone but Waz is basically good.
Right, Waz. I don't know what Waz's deal is.
Actually, Waz is like one of the best QA testers, which is
good.
very interesting. Maybe because he's
What
very
cloak do you wanna
particular
play
about pixels.
I'm gonna try a new cloak each time.
Oh yeah. Maybe
I want to do this one. I want to do
I'll
this.
do Clemency.
Clemency had so many bugs. Because since you have to worry about Specter Knight returning to a safe location, you got to make sure that location's safe.
Yeah.
And so, although actually it wasn't that many, I think we had more issues with others. But
Oh yeah.
Super Skeleton. But I think this armor turned out really well. Whenever we make the armor sets, we always want one that you'll gravitate towards if you're more skittish about losing your progress or losing your stuff and your stats. And so for Shovel Knight, that was like, oh, you'll drop less gold. Plague Knight, I think, similarly was drop less gold, and he had the float burst. But for Specter Knight, every time we approach each game, I can't overstate how much we want to make it feel like an entirely new game. And so we didn't want to just make you drop 1/3 gold. We wanted to attach something new to it that made it feel unique. And so for Specter Knight, that was returning you back to where you were, so you could reattempt the gauntlet, so you could reattempt the challenge.
So Oh God! Whoa!
Yeah, it's Reese.
Whoa!
Hey Reese, how's it going?
So when we were making this, we were like, okay, let's cool it on the map, but we still wanted like some fun surprises when you're in the hub. And that's why we came up with the idea of busting through windows. Just because I think Waz set up the art here, and then we're like, where could they come from? Okay, they could come from the windows. Sure.
Well, there was also a big issue for us is we want to have these events that intrude upon the main game and your expectations for it, but we don't want to lock you into them. So we want you to be able to access the hubs. You can buy upgrades before you get to the secret, the unexpected boss fight. And so that means they naturally have to be when you select the level.
So here's the Dark Reese reveal that we talked about earlier.
Much anticipated. I think he turned out real great.
Yeah, I love this boss fight too.
Oh, nice. The starting point for this boss fight was, what if his basic attack was really oppressive, and that it cleanly hits you out of your dash slash, and it's just something you want to be like really afraid of. But also to kind of mirror Specter Knight, I wanted him to use the wall. So that's why he sticks to the wall but does a jump, so it's not exactly the same. There's cool attacks like that just feel cool. If Reese was in Street Fighter and you saw Dark Reese or Oni Reese, you would have expectations that I hope this boss fight makes good on. He's teleporting, doing shenanigans.
I'm gonna die.
Don't lose to Dark Reese.
I wasn't really paying attention. Where's my will skull? Uh-oh, he's gonna hurt
there he
me.
goes.
He's gonna get me, I know it. I'm gonna embarrass myself.
It's going. Don't die to Dark Reese. One more hit. Yeah.
Close there.
Get posed on. I think Morgan did the animation for Dark
A
Reese.
fun thing about Enchantress flying is we always want her to be high up in the screen. But it's always there ends up being dialogue later, and her bumping into the dialogue always is a problem.
Right.
I almost always get 5 bugs about.
She's 4 tiles higher always.
Right. So that's a fun thing about Enchantress.
Kappa Prize asks, the reason we chose to have Reese play a larger role over anyone else. I mean, we, as part of experiencing more about the characters, we wanted to make sure all the Director for a Day characters were brought in more into the fold.
We wanted them to all be featured in one
right
of the
games.
That's why
that
in
were
Plague
coming
of
out.
Shadows, Baz, you can recruit the Baz. That's why you figure out more about how Reese fits into the plot in Specter Knight.
And the
Mr. Hat.
the thing for Specter of Torment, like we talked about Showdown, the Showdown thing is that we really wanted to get Dark Reese in and like
Right.
make that a thing.
And so we have to set the groundwork so it doesn't feel like some random thing. It's like you understand where it is in the lore and the plot. And so that's where it all came in. It seemed like a match made in heaven. Or hell.
Yeah, and like it made a lot of sense that Specter Knight, like caring for a kid like Reese would be like stand out, right? As a plot thing. Why would this cool
Why wasn't
super
Reese in
cool
King of
character-
Cards? He was on cooldown. The
Yeah,
same,
he was on
like
cooldown.
with the same way. He had such a prominent role in Specter of Torment, and also canonically, he wouldn't have any plot interaction he would have around the time of King of Cards would already be what's in Specter of Torment, and so we didn't think it was necessary to double back on it. The same way, Troupple King doesn't appear in Specter of Torment because he wouldn't fit the tone of the story, and we didn't want to make. He's like a fun, cool character. We didn't want to make him like Specter Knight.
And we knew he would be a bigger featured element in King of Cards,
That's
so
right.
he was on cooldown for Specter of Torment.
Yeah, we try to balance stuff out.
One of the fun things is that all these songs got remixes, and King of Cards, or sorry, Pride Wars, the stage theme is in a minor key, which sounds very cool and kingly and knightly, and we had heard it a million times because we demoed the game at PAX.
Why are you doing this?
I don't know what you're doing. I wasn't thinking.
Why?
And since we demoed it a million times, we were very used to it, and when Jake redid this song, he did it in a major key, and it just tore our minds apart. No one could handle it being in a major key, and I'm sure as a player it is very enjoyable.
The thing that breaks my brain is that unintentionally, Pridemore Keep has the word demo in it. And so it was always destined to be the demo stage.
Whoa!
Pride Demo Keep.
Oh,
The
there's
Clemency Armor!
Clemency armor.
Do it again!
Look at it. It didn't put me forward. See that? It
Right.
put me like.
It
Back
didn't put you on the
path.
platforms that don't exist anymore. It's
But it
perfect.
still didn't make me like do too much work.
That meant flagging all the objects in the game that would be considered like volatile or dangerous.
Right.
So if it's a platform that moves, that's like dangerous. If it's something that disappears, it's dangerous. But any other collision that's static or expected, that's safe. Very fun. Very technical.
Oh, mole. I got
Magma, we
suppressed.
changed. Puzzle Knights is known as Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon because it's a Shovel Knight game. And so by calling it Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, we also wanted to imply better or more clearly what kind of puzzle game it was, because a puzzle game can imply like matching or sliding and things like that. But Pocket Dungeon felt like a cool encapsulation of what you were doing, which is a small, limited dungeon space that was constantly shifting. That's why the name is where it is.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's Pocket Dungeon because it's a phone game, and that is not correct.
Not true. We're taking back the word pocket. It
Yeah.
can be used in everything.
Yeah, I mean, we thought of it like because it was a fun, small dungeon essentially that was
Yeah.
Pocket.
Like a pocket dimension.
And we thought it would be something. Oh, that would be good. It's like a good small experience game too. Like it takes, if like any roguelike, it can take 30 minutes to beat it. So it's like a pocket experience. For like handhelds, I guess.
Someone's asking how we feel about fan games. We think they're pretty neato. It's cool that you guys are inspired to make your own
Yeah,
Shovel Knight
a
games.
fun thing to know is that, or no, it's not a Mega Man fan game, right? The like original music in Shovel Knight, like before it
We-
was Jake's music,
came from.
When we're working in the game, sometimes we put in some assets that convey the feel of the game, even if they're not final. And so for maybe 3 or 4 of the games, for everyone, we're like, well, we're expecting the game's music might be a little bit like Shovel Knight, and we didn't want, or like Mega Man, and we didn't want to just put the 3 tracks we had like Pridemore in every level because Pridemore doesn't fit in like Lost City. And everyone's already played all the Mega Man games to death.
Yeah.
So if you were listening to like, whatever Flashman stage theme, you would think, well, this is Flashman's stage theme. So early on, as a temporary holdover, I put in music from Rocco-chan, a fan-made Mega Man game where you play as Roll with a dash and a lot of cool other mechanics. It has a lovely soundtrack. And that was like, I think the Lost City track was Rocco-chan's lava-esque stage. And that provided a nice motivation to like kind of get a feel for the stage while it was still very, very, very early on. I imagine fan games are similar. So we're kind of on autopilot because Pridemore is that.
Oops.
Oh, maybe too much autopilot.
I slashed
Look how far you go back! Wow, so safe. Good job, Ian.
What the?
David,
Did you hear me press the button?
I heard you die.
This controller is hard.
Fair enough.
I don't like the Pro controller.
Oh, now Waz is laughing at. Oh.
That's all right. There's
No.
chills and spills.
Shut it, was.
But whenever I think about Pridemore, my brain goes numb because it just feels like something I've.
Done a million times.
It's a place I've been to
Yeah.
in my youth.
All right.
So coming up, you'll see that since we worked on King Knight and Specter Knight early on in parallel, you'll see that King Knight vaguely uses the ideas of justice in a very loose sense before the rules were truly finalized. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Well,
Just go,
more
just boost, you
More
boosted.
specifically,
Oh,
my God.
dude. Yeah, I gotcha. Sorry. I put the wind in the griffin.
Oh.
Whatever.
Specter Knight's laughing
One
at
fun
you.
thing about this Skulls is that they used to very much how like Celeste works, but we made this game before Celeste. They used to. We were worried that you might just get a skull and die like that, and they used to return to you like Celeste.
Oh, I have to ask, was the controller acting up there too, or is that...
No, that was me. That was me.
Do you want me to get you another controller?
That was definitely my fault.
I'm sorry. I just wanted
So
to
now
say
you know what I'm saying is true.
That's true.
Because I didn't. I
Trust
complained
earned.
about the controller. Yeah, so we had an idea of the kind of things King Knight would be doing in his adventure, and we tried to incorporate them into the boss fight. When we were considering redoing, different elements. The ground shifting was we wanted to like do something that clearly showed this was more difficult.
Right. Pridemore was the early stage you always go to, so you wanted to make sure you knew off the bat. This
So look,
game
he
has
shoots
changed.
out cards,
Joustus.
and they go in 4 directions. Isn't that crazy?
Makes you think.
But they look like that cool.
And we knew rats would be a big thing in his campaign, so he shoots out rats too.
Funny, the back of the cards are gold, which was the original appearance in King of Cards before we made them blue and red.
Right.
So that's the old art.
And they used to be more rectangular as opposed to square, like they turned out.
That's right. Or taller.
I'm getting phone calls. So.
Okay, here you go.
You can take over.
I'll take over for a bit. Yeah, winning. Some of the, we didn't have any of King Knight's heirlooms settled when we made that boss fight. So we didn't know about the flaming sword or the bubble frog. The only thing that was a carryover was when he falls in a pit, he rises up with the rat, which we ended up using in the armor, but was also a part of King Knight's base mobility early on. If you want to know more about King Knight's mobility, check out YachtClubGames.com, where we did a big old write-up of it. This relic is directly inspired by Ninja Gaiden, where you had the kind of shadow clone sub-weapon. Alright, I'm going to do the Risk. The Risk Raiment of Risk, is you have to break a checkpoint to get a power-up. This came from when we were brainstorming armor ideas. I really wanted something that kind of built upon a mechanic you already knew in Shovel Knight, but in a new way. So you had to think about new ideas. And so, since checkpoints were so prominent, we didn't for Plague Knight, we tried making checkpoints a crafting station before we took out that behavior. And so I always wanted checkpoints for you to consider them for one more resource, as one more benefit. And so that's where the idea of this armor came about. In the end, though, we always ended up with issues where Specter Knight could do too much DPS, and we didn't want to put an artificial limiter on it. And so I think a lot of the edges of this one kind of got tapered off in order to make it a little more balanced or a little less super powerful. And so you can see it creates a dust cloud, or a spectral whoosh that extends your hitbox, but also has the benefit of, if you connect with the scythe and the whoosh at the same time, I think they both do their own damage. So you got a nice sweet spot where it could really mess up enemies. Oftentimes, though, the issue with making Specter Knight armors and costumes or abilities like charge armor and like this one is, we always knew the basic attack should be powered up, but what should we do with the dash slash? And the difficulty was we couldn't make the dash slash deal more damage on anything because it would affect your timing for whether you could use an object to cross or whether you could, actually progress through the game. And so we always had to yield back when it came to amping up the dash slash, in addition to the dash slash being so fast and being able to put out so much damage. And so the idea was with this, maybe you want to land and do some grounded hits to get more damage, rather than just always going with the dash slash. But I think that players gravitate towards the dash slash anyway, and so that makes the effect a lot less desirable, unfortunately.
Someone's asking, how did you guys come up with the idea of Specter Knight skating on this site?
I think we knew we wanted to create something like Specter Knight's already momentum based, right? You see the screen here. I want to go here, then here, then here, and you know that you're thinking about Specter Knight as more of a Tony Hawk character, where you're thinking about what route you're taking and how you'll use the collision. And so we wanted a grind rail was a way to extend that, where when you hop on, you're set on a track and you have to worry about where you're going and how fast. And so we wanted to make a rail object that when you connect to it, you would go in a linear direction and have to follow where you're going. And when we thought about how a character like Specter Knight would traverse such a thing, we wanted to make it as cool as it could be. And I think surfing on a scythe was almost immediately settled on as the only idea that would make the best game. You can see the alternative to that for King Knight is he can find similar grind rails that are frozen over. And while they work a little bit differently, when King Knight touches them, he goes into a fanciful ice skating, because I think that represents a little bit more of how King Knight acts and behaves. He pirouettes when he hits enemies. He takes a bow when he defeats when he beats bosses. And so when he finds a grind rail, he has fun and merriment. And Specter Knight acts cool and edgy. And those small touches are how we differentiate the characters. Another thing with this armor is when you get it, your health is actually reduced too. That's, again, goes back to we're antsy about DPS. And it's one of the last times where an armor had a drawback, which was something we try to avoid, especially with King Knight. Because if it has a drawback, you probably just won't use it.
Unless everything has a drawback.
Right, but then you probably won't use the armors.
Oh no!
Why did some of the body swap characters get scrapped, like Pants, right?
They didn't get scrapped.
They just were
never planned, and people just drew them for fun, so we included them in the art book.
Yep. We always knew that it was going to be those characters that had a direct impact on the plot, and we're the bosses and have a sprite that you fight or are a major actor in the story. But you know, when you're drawing out all the knights, it's fun to imagine other characters in that world. So that's why like Baz exists in Phantom Striker. But another issue for us, especially when approaching any of the updates and any of the campaign updates and any of the side editions, is we need to make sure that there isn't too much like endless threading of content. It's like, well, we made Shovel Knight co-op, should we make every campaign co-op? And it would be cool, definitely, to do that. But it's also a huge time sink because now it's slowing down.
Skip a check.
No, I think it was just right there, that's all. If we need to extend this feature infinitely to all modes of the game, that's going to add such a debt that we might never ever be able to finish it. Especially when, in a lot of ways, we don't want to add what's expected. We want to add new features. That's like where Horus's Challenge comes from. That's where King Knight's card game comes from. We want to surprise you and not just map all the content out in all directions, which is a little bit more expected. And it also gives a unique identity. Now when you're replaying Shovel of Hope, you'll be excited that there's this feature. Maybe when you're playing Plague of Shadows, you'll like be excited for customization. And that helps the games not all feel samey or feel like the similar experiences. There's stuff to look forward to. I think that's very fun and cool. Yeah.
What were your favorite campaigns to make?
It's really tough to think about them like that. we're like in the thick of it, and we love. Like, we only released them because we were happy and loved them.
Well, yeah, and I would say it's like different parts of each where the, you know, most, like, it's usually fun, like, when you're in the middle, like, churning out a bunch of cool stuff, right? And when you're at the end of it, it's like the worst.
Right.
Right? So it's weird to think which one was the most fun, because usually they all have their ups and downs.
Excuse me. Love doing that.
Plushies and Twitch chat.
Oh, thank you. Super.
Yeah, the like moving, using the wall kip,
As
the
an
ledge
extra.
kip, as a
Doing this is fun.
platforming thing. Only it shows up in the challenge stages, right? But
Yeah.
we didn't really. It was like considered too challenging to do.
That's the bonus bit of content, much like for Shovel Knight doing like a slash jump or
Right.
like multi-hits.
This is one of my favorite rooms.
Really makes good on the blobby breakout room.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I skipped it with the death touch.
Yeah. Just like that, and that Green Knight I've always really enjoyed too.
Gamerettes asks what we think about Shovel Knight fan games. Rewind about 10 minutes. We love them. They're very cool, and that's cool. That's a cool way to celebrate the game with friends and explore areas. Just don't distribute our stuff. That kind of stuff.
Why does Specter Knight act so edgy?
That's just who he is. I think, I think he's dealing with a lot of dread and regret after the events that transpired through Specter of Torment. And he's kind of processing them in his own ways. I think he was already kind of headstrong as Donovan in his past life. And, you know, he kind of literally transformed into a new life that he is not super enviable.
What happened to King Knight's mother after his campaign? I mean, maybe we'll find out one day. But I would picture she's just like, you know, doing her thing.
You can see her in the ending caring for the people that were betrayed by King Knight by one, renting out her, or like letting them stay in her house, taking care of them. So I think she's supportive of the people. She like wants to help them out.
Yeah.
She's not washing her hands of the situation. Like Knight just not caring that much about this. He's about to get destroyed.
Actually, what was the idea behind Donovan's dance?
Donovan's dance, as Waz might tell you, is usually, for some of the cases, like for Specter Knight's core mobility, that gets made by the initial sprite sequence. Sorry. For Specter Knight's initial animations, everything you're seeing here, that's usually done in-house or all done like all at once so that we know how the character works and functions at the gameplay level. When we make alternate costumes, like with the case with Amiibo and in some cases like Donovan, in some cases we already have the base animation and we sometimes contract out people that you can find in the credits to make the animations alternate. And so we'll say like, hey, here's Specter Knight, here's Donovan's model sheet, make all the animations work like this, and we'll revisit the ones that we might have revisions on. And when I don't know the name of the pixel artist, again, we're the programmers here on the project.
Waz, you should say who the name
Waz
is.
could know. When he sent us back the animations, he said, hey, here's all the Donovan animations. I hope you like them. Also, I was like, I was getting on the subway or like I was about to get on the bus and I saw a guy doing this dance and I just had to animate it. So here it is.
Yeah, he was like on rollerblades or something.
Is that
Right.
what it was? I didn't know it was like based on a person.
I think that's what it was. Or like he saw that action in real life.
I think it was like he was in a park or something, and this guy on rollerblades was just dancing around the park.
That's awesome.
And he just loved it. He's like, I love this dance. I wanted to try animating it. And since I was working on Donovan, I put that in. And we're like, whoa, that's awesome. We'll like see if we can find a place for it. And so once we knew that there was going to be a Donovan outfit, we added it in as a secret double down taunt, and there you go.
So Luan's functionality in the stages is something I remember going back and forth on a lot. We just like couldn't figure out, well, he's a character that follows you, but what does he do that's like interesting? And all anyone could think of was basically like making him like a dash slash target, right? And but like that's like what lamps already do, right? And we didn't. But in the end, we were like, okay, let's just do that, and maybe we'll make the mobility slightly different, and it will be different enough. But it really ended up being the same thing, and as a lamp. Yeah. But I think the fun thing is like, it like sort of tells the story of like, how they work together in a fun way. And it is like consistent with the lamps, I think, was like sort of the realization after we put it in.
I also feel like it's not analogous to like Shield Knight, where you're using your primary mechanic with your partner on the adventure, and you get to see how that plays out with a human
you
organic
get to see
character.
like how, how it was like how Luan like and them work together in like a strong way.
There's also
and now when you're doing that thing, it feels sort of sad.
There's also a lot of stress when it comes to making a character that's playing alongside you, where you're like, well, he should like run around and attack enemies.
Right.
But when that happens, you're like upset. You're like, I want to attack the enemies. Why is he doing it? And so I think at one point we talked about like briefly, it's like, well, what if there's like blorbs in the background? You see them like fighting them, but it's still like, I want to get them. And if they drop gems, I want to get those gems. Like I'm the player. I want to see it happen. And so we didn't want the character to have that much of an overwhelming gameplay interrupting presence.
Yeah, and figuring out how he could like be in the stage but also not be competing with your
Hey,
he goes in the background. He goes in the background so he's not like competing with the like actual stuff you're interacting with.
Right.
And confusing what you're supposed to be doing.
And we thought it would be a failure, and I still think, if he's like, okay, let's go to the tower, and then he runs right, and then you do 18 screens of gameplay, and he's like, okay, we made it to the end.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say at the end of that, we went through the tower together. You would think, the script moved over here. I want to talk about the caltrops real quick.
Oh, yeah.
So the caltrops are a fun little weapon that you can get early on, and if you don't get it, then Donovan or Luan gets them for you and hands them to you. The reason is this is in the past, so you can't have any of the curios, but it's fun to have like a sub-weapon, so we wanted there to be something with Donovan's core set that you identify with. And since Donovan is like, he's carrying a cutlass or sword, we wanted something that like it would be likely that maybe a roguish character would have, and so something like this seemed fun. I wanted these to have a more toy-like quality because it's something that you get and then it goes away and you get it again. And so the idea of like hitting them around and then making a little bouncy noise and just kind of feeling like something that isn't, I don't know, takes a little bit of skill to use, but you like are eager to use it, would make it exciting when you go back to be the character, or at the end when you turn in all the red skulls and you get them again. Even if it's not the most effective sub-weapon in the world. Although, even though we made the caltrops and Shield Knight's boss fight, which you did separately, I am still retroactively surprised how effective they are in Shield Knight's fight, even if it wasn't exactly planned that way. Where in this fight, for some players, you're just desperate for damage. You're like, anything that can hit Shield Knight, please. Real match here.
Yeah, often, to put some context on there, we don't usually plan our bosses and our... Like, we make the bosses considering, like, your base core mechanics. And then we put all the upgrades and everything in afterwards. Or, like, alongside, but not considering them with the boss fight. And then if something's, like, horribly broken with the boss fight, we'll go back and try to correct it. But typically we don't, like, consider those two things at the same time. So it's surprising when something like Caltrops works really well with the boss.
Whenever I see Donovan or Luan go into the background, I think of King of Fighters.
No, yeah.
I think of 94 to 98 when it's like, oh yeah, he's like back there thinking, he's like, Joe Higashi's really upset with me, I'm not doing a good job. Gonna lose. This fight's definitely hard going for a lot of players because you can't bring in a lot of your kit.
Yep.
And so you're like, wait, my armor, wait this. And so it's kind of a
It's
kind of a skill check.
And she's like the hard test of your dash slash, right? Like
Yes.
you go into dash slash and you don't always get the correct reward.
Yeah, so it's definitely a hard check where like we're suddenly asking some things of you in a way where you don't have those tools, and you kind of have to be a little more precise than a lot of other boss fights. Okay, wait, actually I care now.
Someone's wondering, how do you guys test difficulty?
We do our best to have compassion for the player at time of implementation, where we're like, oh, like obviously a player can't identify this in this many frames, it should be slower. But we also try to run it by as many people as we can, whether that's other members of the team, whether that's QA, whether that's playtesting. Normally at 2 or 3 phases on the project, we have limited playtesting where we bring people on site and they play through a rougher version of the game, and we always take all that feedback to heart, as well as packs or going to a show floor where we can see people playing in real time and we just tweak the numbers, tweak the values.
Yeah. I mean, at this point we have a lot of experience, like with Shovel Knight's difficulty.
Right.
So we generally don't need to use all those tools as frequently as we did when we originally shipped the game. Or things I did, like for example, when I made bosses during Shovel of Hope, I would like play the game with my controller upside down, or like one-handed, or like covering one eye, or whatever. Like I would like
an impairment.
Yeah,
like
I would impair myself because I wasn't used to knowing like how all Shovel Knight players would respond to it. So I tried to like play with a disability essentially. But now when I make a boss, I like never do that because I'm so used to what the difficulty of like a boss could be in Shovel Knight game.
So in Specter, here's a fun thing. In Specter of Torment, that was the update where we actually, right, where we allowed you to bind subweapon to a third button.
Yes.
In originally, Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows didn't have that, and so the reason that that came about is for Specter Knight, the accidentally pressing up an attack to use your subweapon and pressing attack to dash slash would mean going in drastically different directions. And so jumping to throw a psych at that versus jumping to do that would have very different outcomes. And we knew for a lot of players that would be too much and would be unpleasant. So we decided to move it to a third button by default and open up that ability for Shovel Knight and Plague Knight as well. So that hopefully the game is just that much more friendly.
I think the option was there before.
It definitely wasn't default.
Yeah, but it definitely wasn't default though. And what we opened up for Specter of Torment was making it so they had different defaults for each campaign.
I think you're gonna baz it, by the way. Don't be
I
surprised.
think this is my last stage. Sorry to it.
Okay, I can finish it up.
Sorry about that. Oh no, Baz. Go on a date.
Oh, thanks.
So this is one of the big things we wanted to do in Specter of Torment was have rails. We thought it'd be super cool to have him grinding.
We talked about rails at a great length, actually.
Already?
Yeah.
Well, you're out.
You were out.
Oh.
But you're welcome to add more to it.
Well, anyway, it ended up we only ended up putting him in this we like thought originally that they would be something maybe in every stage, and then I think became clear to us that it would be cooler if they were only one stage.
Yeah, they're very
As like a gameplay, like, here's the interesting thing about this stage.
Definitely. I think Alec worked a lot on making the rails the best they can, and I think the issue is that when you put in rails, you need a lot of real estate, a lot of scrolling screen to compensate, and so at the end of the day, when you put in a rail section, you need a very specific type of room, and so if we made those rails appear in other levels, all those levels would feel the same, even with some new objects in there, and so all the levels would feel the same, which is usually against what we're going for with level design.
This enemy here is interesting because he only shows up in this room, right? And I think is one of the there's a couple of enemies that only show up in in Shovel Knight world universe in one spot, and this is one of the few ones like that. This is it, the whole game.
See you
And
later,
all Shovel Knight treasure trove. Because we usually try to get a few cases or like 3 rooms like a minimum with an enemy in order for them to even be viable in the game. This enemy here took a fair amount of iteration. We knew we wanted something that was like expanding upon the rainbow bird statues that you had seen previously.
You learned more about them, like, oh, it's probably like supposed to be this bird.
And sort of function similarly, and figuring out how to actually make that into something that everyone was happy with. Took a while.
That's cool. I think he's a real great screen lock boss fight.
Yeah.
Real good.
I think we had a lot of
Why?
different layouts to this room too. And when we were testing it, this was like a lot of people struggled with this fight, I think, which made it go through a lot of iteration too. We were still sort of figuring out like what was actually the difficulty of, because when you have 8 stages that you can pick at any time, right? This can no longer be like the hardest thing in the world for you to just like walk into, right?
Yep.
So I think that was one of the big struggles.
Specter Knight flat
And we
challenge
wanted these
balance.
lamps here, but since you dash slash the bird too, in order to get to it, it was a big struggle to like have those overlapping all the time. It's a big mess.
TMK Dash asks about if there was mod support, what would the implementation be for it? That's no idea. We're not planning to add mod support. We have our hands full making new content and games, and so for us,
we're modding our own game all the time.
Formal mod support is something that I think would benefit from being in there from the ground up. It would require a lot of care to make sure it was supported correctly, and so that's not something we really focus on here at Yacht Club. Will you ever show beta builds of the later campaigns? I don't think there are any beta builds of earlier campaigns that are all that interesting. The way we kind of isolate the gameplay mechanics in our design articles. You can see early Plague Knight and early King Knight and all that. But usually the fun comes from the level design themselves. In a lot of cases, we didn't start on the level designs until we really hammered out the character. And the levels would probably look like we'd have to pull 100,000 revisions to get drastically different feeling stuff, because sometimes it's more incremental.
Is there a secret over there?
No, there's not. So I don't think we have plans to revisit the beta builds of old games at this time. The Shovel Knight one was a little bit more formative because we're still figuring out what shops look like, what levels look like, and so I think it was a little bit more interesting to go back to.
Interesting too, you guys went through ability
Yeah,
over time. That I think got really drastic changes over time.
definitely. I think we already tried to pick out the really good parts.
An interesting thing is that Specter Knight actually changes colors when he goes on these rails, right?
That's right. He lightly changes red and blue to match the color of the rail direction, where red always goes left and blue always goes right. The color was originally much more pronounced, where his entire cape would change, but it would be really disarming. And so we made it really subtle because we're hyper-obsessive weirdos sometimes. I hope you enjoy this feature.
I'm not sure why we like put that in. Was that just a fun like?
That was like the rail armor. It's like, here's the palette. It should be this color when you go this way, this color when you go this way. It was part of the initial pitch. We were just
okay.
that in like that in love with the idea of it.
That's so funny.
It was early on.
I'm always surprised how much use these ladder guys got.
Name for comments. Yes, it's still possible to obtain the Enchantress achievement. The things we changed in 4.1 are related to stalling way above the screen for far longer than we intended. There are lots of ways to obtain that achievement in ways that don't involve exploiting that mechanic.
Oh
man, that's brutal.
We made the Edge Farmer because we thought about, we wanted to make another Edge, like Hedge character. We had the Hedge Pupil and Hedge Farmer. And for Specter Knight, who's like a cool try-hard character, we wanted to make an adjacent Hedge character. And we also really loved the play on words with Edge Farmer, like he was talking with an accent. And the rest went from there. Went out of control from there. But yeah, that's the kind of like exploration that we wanted to do. I think this room to the right is like the last level room Alec changed on the game. He like in a cold sweat before shipping, just like, I have to, this room needs to be like improved, and it is, and it came out much better. I think it originally just had a very flat grind rail situation.
One of the fun things I keep thinking about this stage is we have these walls that you can't climb them, right? And figuring out the art for those, I think, was a big like contentious thing, because it was like, oh, we're gonna have to do different art in every stage.
Right.
No, like what could that even look like, right? That would sell you
Can't
the
it just
fact that
be
you can't
vines
climb
and every
it.
level has vines and that means you
Right.
can't climb it? It's like, no, it'll be capes and pride more, ice and stranded ship.
Right, and just figuring out what that could be and not be confusing and read as the same kind of thing in every stage was a real difficult problem.
You can see Specter Knight's, his scythe and his face are blue and red very subtly.
It's very, very,
It's very subtle. Look under his mask.
So originally, when we were making these, you could not control your speed. See how I can go slower and faster? The only reason, these were all fixed speeds. And that's how we intended it all the way until we made the final boss in the game. And it just didn't feel fun at a fixed speed.
Right. It had more fun when you have some control over it.
Right, and then we went back and changed all the stages so it could work with that flexible speed that was in the boss fight.
I just want to jump in. A lot of people are asking plot questions, but the point of this stream is to talk about the game we already made. So we won't be able to answer questions about things that aren't revealed in the game proper. So just letting you all know, if you have pent-up Shovel Knight lore questions, those will be questions for a later day.
This is another. I'm sorry. This is another boss fight that like was really. This was really hard in the original campaign, right?
It was already a challenging fight.
So figuring out how to not make it really hard was a big struggle.
Adding walls really helps. That gives Specter Knight loves being up there so much more.
And this was the first boss fight where we were like, we're gonna make one of these be a multi-screen battle.
Right. Overdrive Ostrich.
Like Overdrive Ostrich, and how do we do that? And also, it's really hard. So that was the fun of this fight. What were you gonna say, Shane?
Someone was asking how you guys came up with Traitorous.
Traitorous is, we sometimes toss out fake names for fun. Another one is Tragicles, a character that's on the up and up, but I hope he does okay. And like the joke is that Tragicles might befall a tragic fate. And I think Traitorous was probably said as a joke, like, we need to make 8 NPCs, and you know, what if there's a character named like, I think originally he was called Wormtongue, maybe as a reference to Lord of the Rings, and also like a character. It's he's Snake Tongue. He's villainous.
I think it originally started with Sandy. Sandy just like drew a character
that looked evil.
That like was hunched over. I don't know. That's a good question.
And so yeah, it began to take more and more form, and we just loved Traitorous. And then the dialogue writes itself at that point, where King Knight's like, "Hey, you look on the level, like you should join me." However, we joke about the best part is Traitorous, in the end, never betrays you, which is kind of a betrayal in and of itself, like of your expectations. And so, the lore of Traitorous goes pretty deep.
Yeah.
Good job.
I think that's gonna be Sandy.
Oh, Sandy's one of the pixel artists who joined us for King of Card and Showdown.
Yep. You can find him on Twitter at a handle I don't have recognized, Bandygrass. At Bandygrass. He's been releasing some pixel art stuff like the Plague of Shadows fairy animations where the fairy gets sucked into the cauldrons. Yeah.
I get one of these.
Right. Traitorous was a triple agent pretending to be a double agent all along.
I gotta get the hover plume so I can finally play like Showdown, because that's been really throwing me off.
That definitely helps. Hey, Last Hardman. Thanks for stepping in. And glad we've talked on Steam. I hope it was a positive interaction. Steam is stressful sometimes.
It's a fun world.
How would you have made a Polar Knight campaign? He's ginormous.
We talked about maybe like the Adventures of Young Polar Knight, and he's much smaller. Or we would maybe lean all the way into it, and all the levels feel big and chunky, but like deliberate and contextual. That's something we never thought
or
through.
Maybe he's actually like young Polar Knight and he's much smaller.
I just said that.
Oh, you did?
I literally just said that. I'm sorry.
I wasn't listening. I'm sorry.
Oh man.
It's hard to play.
But anyway, maybe he would be
hard
like
to play the game and talk. And
maybe he'd be young Polar Knight and much smaller.
Maybe he'd be like a baby Polar Knight.
Like
is
baby
what I
Polar
meant to
Knight,
say.
and he's much smaller.
I feel like Baz is gonna come in first.
Baz is definitely going to come in.
Is Madame Eber canon?
Yes,
Everything is canon.
she's literally in King of Cards in all campaigns, in all releases.
So Baz was on cooldown for
Right.
this campaign
Because he was so prominent in
but
Plague
we
of
just
Shadows.
couldn't help ourselves, and he had to show up.
Well, it was also important because in Plague of in Shovel Knight, he says that he petitioned to join the Order and they turned him down.
We really wanted to show.
We wanted
up.
to connect those wires so you actually see the interaction happen.
And also we had two windows, and we had to break
We had to break
both
the second
windows. We had to do it.
It's also works better because Specter Knight had to make such a sacrifice at the end, and so you can kind of think, well, Specter Knight just took Baz into the Order. Wouldn't he be free? Like, wasn't he looking for knights?
Yeah.
But no, Baz is so bad that he, even with that, Specter Knight's like, no, we're not doing that. And so I think it really works on multiple levels.
See you later, Baz.
Someone's commenting on the symmetrical broken windows.
It's very pleasant.
Yeah, we actually we joked a lot that maybe that like one of the windows should get fixed and then broken through again. And another joke was like one of them should get fixed and left asymmetrical to like drive everyone nuts forever.
which we explore in other ways. My favorite part watching Specter of Torment blind Let's Plays is when someone's like, oh, I'm going to go to the Lost City. Then Baz breaks in,
Right.
and they're like, what was I doing? Oh, anyway, I was going to the flying machine.
Yeah.
The fact that it's like that disorienting that you like
Yep.
get knocked off
Yeah.
your path is really delicious. Oh, yeah, there it is. That's the original Specter Knight intro
That's
pose.
what it used to be in every stage all the time, 100%.
I think the first time I saw it, I immediately went to Iron Whale and took it with him on the
Oh,
beach.
right,
And
that's
it's
what
like,
I think of.
It's
every
like,
time.
hey,
Yeah.
oh, you come to this lock often? Well, hey, I guess we could hang out. The animations on this garish armor are really cool. You skate on the ground, which was an inspiration from Shadow the Hedgehog. In retrospect, I will say, as the implementer at the time, I wanted to make it a little bit different because in Shovel Knight you do like a flip, and in Plague Knight you do like funny jumps. And so Spectre had this really cool dash slash where you see like goes in that vapor trail when he dashes. And so to try and add a little bit more oomph to it, I put the shadow trail on it because that's a feature that we implemented for custom Knight, Shovel Knight amiibos, and so I thought we'd use it. I think Sean hated it because it adds a lot of noise, And 3 years on, I would say he's right, and I shouldn't have done it. The armor would be a lot cooler if it was just the cool animations without the trail, in my opinion at this point. And I remember at implementation thinking, like, maybe if you, like, double tap, you could turn it on and off.
Oh,
And
really?
it's like, and that's how far I thought about it. But in the end, I didn't do it. I just feel like with the trail, you kind of lose sight on what the actual animation changes are a little too much.
I think it's cool.
That's cool.
And with that, I have to exit.
All right.
Hope everyone enjoys playing Specter of Torment. This is my last hard sell for Specter of Torment.
Buy it today. if
It's
you could.
discounted right now. You should totally get it and tell your friends. I think it's a great place to start if you haven't played Shovel Knight before, and also a good place to continue with Shovel
If you're
Knight.
thinking like, oh man, Animal Crossing, I can't wait to go on that island. What if you first had a spectral adventure in 8-bit?
Yeah.
And that'll hold you over until your island adventure. Or Doom.
Or do.
This will get you ready for Doom. No problem.
And with that, I will exit. And thanks for everyone who has already played Specter of Torment and joined us for this adventure.
Yeah,
Like,
fans everywhere.
it's lovely to make games and have people play them. So thank you. Bye everyone.
Bye, David.
But don't worry, I'm still gonna be here, so
All right.
don't get sad. We're gonna beat Specter of Torment. Then you can get sad. Right. The fly feather is contentious around the time of level design, because after making the most intricate of rooms, one of the level designers would show it to another designer, like, look how cool it is. You like do this and you go there, and then what the reaction would always be was, oh yeah, or just use the feather and you don't do anything, and then everyone would look sad, and then they'd go on and work on the next part of the game. But that's like what we usually do with cheats, with relics. We don't want them to be hard checks where you have to use them in one spot. We want them to be ways that feel like you're getting a leg up in a situation. So, we make the gold armor and he can block, but if you use the death touch, he's dead. We make the fly feather that can invalidate a challenge, and you still have to know to use it. You still have to know to find it, and I think that's great. How do you recommend learning to make games? I would recommend making games. I know that seems straightforward, but if you should start small and make games that you can finish yourself, whether that's like a simple puzzle game or whether that's a Space Invaders game or a genre you already know, I would say starting with genres you're already familiar with are really helpful, because you know where the quality should be or what parts are really important. If you made a Pac-Man game, you would know if something's wrong if the ghosts weren't following their paths, and then you'd have to learn more about how that pathing works, and then you can kind of build up your skill set. Then once you have everything set up, you can build on it more and decide to go in a different direction and make it work differently. And then once you have those values in place and you know about what you care about in a video game, you can make riffs on it or take different directions or subvert it, and you just build up that vocabulary and understanding of it. Whoop. But yeah, I was out of darkness, so I died.
Aww.
If you guys are asking about future product announcements, obviously I can't talk about that here. So I can't talk about new games or games that aren't out. That's not what this stream is about, so can't help really.
I was curious why mini bosses don't get health bars.
Mini bosses don't get health bars because there are mini bosses, not bosses. And so if you got to halfway through the stage and the boss health meter filled up, you might think that's the boss, even though you fight Specter Knight at the end of the stage or you fight Propeller Knight. And so we wanted mini bosses to be more like a mini boss in Super C or a Contra game, where it's a sudden obstruction, you're not quite sure how much health it has left, and you're just doing your best to take it down. Likewise, the inspiration for the HUD being static how it is goes back to a lot of classic NES games like Castlevania or Ninja Gaiden, where you saw that boss meter the entire level and you just knew it was waiting, and that was that was imagery we wanted to conjure, and so that's why it is how it is. some classic gems showing you how you should do the challenge. Although I sort of cheated it and didn't do it. For more of that, read our Specter of Torment level design article. Please, it's like really cool. Everyone put so much, Alec put so much work into it.
A lot of work.
And then the team all helped edit it and suggest changes. No. Ah, let that one go.
If you guys got questions for Ian, you should ask.
I'm a programmer on the game. I made all the character mobility, some bosses, some enemies, some menus, some features. I did custom night. But it's also cool just to hang. We also talk about what we're playing. Playing Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. That's been fun. Playing Phantasy Star 2 on Genesis. That's been cool. I just finished Phantasy Star 1 on the Switch Sega Ages version. Finished I, Somnium Files like a few months ago. That's a visual novel.
Is that how you actually say it?
Yes.
I?
AI.
Really?
I. We can talk about anime games, you know, whatever. Ah, shit! Great.
I'm glad I could distract you.
Could Custom Night ever come to other consoles without Amiibo? I mean, it would be possible, but we're not working on Shovel Knight anymore, so we're not planning any more updates or changes. Maybe, like, you know, maybe way, way down the line when we're doing some kind of new take on things.
Neil's curious, or no, it's Moon actually. Have you played Phantasy Star Online?
Yes, I played Phantasy Star Online on the GameCube, so I had episode 1 and 2 all on that one disc. And I bought the router, and I was super excited to play it, and I was super excited to be playing it. It felt like I was on a whole new world. Oh yeah, there's the missing skull for Scarlet. Yeah. And then, to let you know that you collected it, it appears there. The issue is that when people picked it up, they would check their menu and not see it here, and they'd be like, wait, did I get it? I'm scared. And this helps let you know that you have something special to turn in. Yeah, I played Star Online on GameCube. I played it online. The first time it booted up like the web browser with like bad JPEGs loading in intermittently to log in, I just felt like it was, you know, a whole new world.
Oz wants you to talk about the EX walk inside of Grand Blue Fantasy.
Oh yeah, Vasaraga has a command walk that is really cool, and we can play Grand Blue on stream one day, and I'll show you all how it works.
The first time I saw that character, my first thought was, this is a Waz character right here.
But Waz didn't like it.
I know.
Waz says he likes dapper villains, and so that's fair. He's probably more into Bud.
Waz is saying, what? I love him?
I don't know, Waz. You said it was alright. So David put together this boss fight, but I think this is such a cool extra take on Propeller Knight where the floor literally gets broken out. It uses Specter Knight's climbing mobility, similar to like Horus's Tower. We added the wind, I think, because it was a little challenging to just do it raw, so adding an extra like levitation helped give you time to evaluate it. But I could be wrong on that. I think we always joke about how many clouds there are, but if it's fewer clouds, it looks weird, so it's necessary. It's all necessary.
I was wondering what's the most intricate thing you've ever had to program in the game. Or I guess program ever, maybe? I don't know.
I can't believe... I'm sorry, Waz. I'm sorry I betrayed you on Vasaraga. I work on, like, games that are throwbacks in a lot of ways, so I don't know if intricacy is usually what I'm thinking about. I think the intricate part is, like, continuing to build up and maintain the same game. So it's like, well, we have to add this new mobility, but how does it work with all these objects? And a little less so, like, I don't know, this like server, like we need to pull the server and tick every so often. Otherwise, players won't be able to like shoot reliably on bad connections. So I don't know if intricacy is something I really have on my mind.
What happens when Specter Knight eats fresh food?
I think it's immediately distasteful to him. I think it would make him sick, like if you ate rotten food. Don't eat rotten food, by the way. I'm not advocating for that. what inspired the skeleton couple dance sequence? We wanted to have a dance sequence for all the games, and we knew that Specter Knight would be, if Specter Knight just sat there and watched the Tropical King dance, it would be kind of a poor fit. And we didn't want the Tropical King to be featured in Specter of Torment because it would be kind of a tonal clash. So we realized that we wanted there to be a reward for turning in all the red skulls, and we wanted it to be a goal that you're working for, and not just something where he says, hey, bring me red coins. Okay, thanks for the red coins. We wanted there to be an end goal. And we originally had it that when you turned in the very last skull, it would be the one you needed. It would be Scarlet. But we realized most players don't get 100%, and so we moved it up so you would hopefully see it by the end of the game, and you would see this reuniting happen. And then we ended up moving the Donovan armor to be the full reward for getting all of them. So it's a little more likely. I have to get these relics, though, to see it. And so the dance, I think, led the charge in terms of the inspiration for it based on the character. And when it came down to implementation, I just got a YouTube video of a dance, of the context of the dance, like a few reference videos of the animations, and it's like, make it like this. And I went, okay. Although, since it's such a grounded dance where the characters don't move about too much, it'd be weird if they danced into the sky while doing the animations that they do. So I added the red skulls falling from the sky. I think that was something I added without checking with anyone. Another thing that happened with the dance is normally the animations get made and we have the idea set, and we also send out the spec to Jake, who makes our music. And I remember on this one in particular, it was something like, hey, we have a lot going on and we need to make sure that Specter Knight releases on time. So the dance should be exactly this many seconds. But by the end of it, I think it ended up being 3 times longer. And I didn't want to just cut the dance short in the middle of the notes because that would be very jarring. So I think there had to be a lot of... I had to find time, or I had to find a little bit more parts in there.
Actually, while I was saying it was Kurlagon that added it.
I see.
Yeah.
Curry Taro or Kurlagon. I think Taro is in the credits.
Just Taro, yeah.
Yeah, okay. He animated the dance based on Waz's direction. And Chris Kurlagon's work is very, very wonderful. Speaking of Batman Brave and the Bold, I think he did DS animations.
Yes, he did. Just about every Pixel game I think he was on.
If you're looking back, because it's the 30th anniversary for Way Forward, Chris Kurlagon had a hand in many lovely pixel animated things in those games. Although I think Shantae was before his time.
The original one, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other ones, I think he.
All right, let's. Oh, I have to build more levels. That's right. I'm ahead of the curve.
Are you still behind?
No, I need to beat a level to turn in the last things.
Oh, you guys never missed a twist either, so you could see Missy bouncing.
I can miss it on purpose in this level. For another example, I also did the broccoli dancer, or the dancer dance in the original Shovel Knight, and I just got those animations of all of her moves with no notes and just a song. And so the reason that she, knocks the characters back and forth is because I wanted there to be a little bit more action to focus on. And the reason she jumps on the back bar is because the level is so low to the ground, you're just staring at the same scan line the whole time. So I wanted to add a little bit more visual flourish. And so I realized one of the animations could sort of be used as a jump, and I kind of went from there. But we approach all the dances differently, so I think some of them are a little more scripted or have a little bit more exacts. And I think sometimes David just says, I'm not doing this unless someone tells me, unless someone gives me some starting tips for how they envision it working. Don't just hand me fish and say, make a fish dance.
But he did make a fish dance.
But he did make that fish dance.
A very big wish.
So much money.
Let's see what I figure out. Who's the best dancer in all of Shovel Knight?
Tropical King. That's his whole thing. And he's the only one who successfully taught other characters to dance. Oh, almost did it.
I love how Specter Knight ignores the dance during the dance. Second floor of the hub.
Thank you. I think I put that all together. I definitely put it all together, but I think I made all the calls on that. It's like, oh yeah, this animation looks like he like doesn't care, but it shouldn't just play the same one. He could do like two funny animations, and then at the end, I guess because of the whole joke, we wanted to give you an ability like an extra taunt, and so tying it to that was the extra final bit. Likewise, the item prompt where it says like, you remain defiant in the face of jubilance. That was all temp text I put in that got a laugh, so it got finaled. A lot of stuff like that on the game from all things, as you probably gathered from what we've been talking about. Somebody will make an animation, or somebody will make a character, someone will make a joke, and if it catches on like wildfire in the team, we'll try to, formalize it and build it into a thing. So long as it's like still consistent with the characters and doesn't change the world too much. Usually the only reason we would have for like turning something down is if it changes someone's perception of how the characters act or behave, like too drastically in an unintended way.
I don't know if you can answer this, or have a concise answer for this, but how do you handle the responsive jump height in these games?
We usually base it on tiles, so we already know that the game is a tile-driven game, and we already know how many tiles are on screen, and we have like the HUD all finalized. So we already know that if the character can jump higher than the screen, it's too high, right? And we know that if you can't even climb up a single tile, it's no good. So we start working with a baseline, and if the game involves ascending too many tiles, like Mighty Bomb Jack, it feels like a game where you're like, I don't know, gonna die. I can do it.
Can you?
Definitely.
Oh my gosh.
Nice. So we don't want it to be a game where you feel like you have infinite height. We want the character to feel a little more weighty, a little more grounded. And so for Shovel Knight, we ended up on those 4 or 5 tiles. We also normally, the exact height is usually like, we say it 4 but not 5. And what that means is like, you can see Specter Knight here has enough to clear this tile so you can get that little extra leg up. It shouldn't, if it felt like he could just almost make it, then that would be frustrating. So we always want you to round up over the tile and feel a little bit more there versus like just making it or not. So for Shovel Knight, he started with he ended up being one of the more aerially powerful characters. He had a nice springy jump. For Plague Knight, we wanted to focus on technical ability. So he can reach higher heights, but you have to do a lot more work. And that's why his double jump feels stilted, because if you make the double jump stilted, you would be more incentivized to use the bomb burst to make up for it. And for Specter Knight, since wall climbing is so powerful and you get so much extra height, we wanted to make the jump smaller so that you were incentivized to use the wall climb to make up for it. Otherwise, if Specter Knight could jump as high as Shovel Knight and could climb even higher, he would be able to clear the screen like this with ease, when he can already make it like 60% of the way. Especially when you combine it with the dash slash. So yeah, by combining all the design intentions, we come up with a jump height that just feels right by the end of the day.
I don't know if you want to talk about any of the showdown characters who didn't make the cut.
I mean, we talked about them in the past. Early on, we put in a lot of characters because we wanted to focus on exploring the bounds of what the game could be. And so, like, I think the game is in Guardian Heroes, which is a beat 'em up on the Sega CD. You could unlock a bunch of goofy characters like Villager that could only like run and throw a pot, and you like never would want to be these characters, but it's fun that you could be them. And so early on, we focused on a bunch of different enemies to see if there would be enemy types that would be valuable. And so you could be Wisdom, and you could be Birder. And the Birder could only change his direction with a dash attack and would otherwise bounce around the screen. But in the end, it felt like we would rather focus our energy on making more full-featured characters rather than supporting all these one-off characters, because then you're like, well, how does the Birder's story mode work? What's his plot? What's his intro animation? What's his pose? And so that extra debt really added up in a way that we didn't want to tackle for it. Even making a limited character where it says like limited and you know that he can't be used in all the modes would be a significant amount of work and extra testing. And we wanted to make sure all the characters could work in all the modes. For Wisdom, since he was more of a humanoid, we had him running around. The animation you see in, I think at the end of King of Cards, where he's like walking out of the Iron Whale, is from his like showdown walk animation at the time. He could walk around and change magic spell types, which would change his palette, and he could cast 3 different types of spells. But by the end of it, Wisdom's most iconic feature is that he stands still and charges spells. And so by making him mobile and changing how the spells work, it didn't really feel like it was that character anymore. So we decided to focus on Gold Armor, and Liquid Samurai, which are enemies that have more mobility naturally baked into the package. And so we decided to not move forward with Wisdom.
Where did the idea of King Birder come from?
The idea came from that we love birders, and we wanted to go to a new location. It's like, well, you're going to the Troupple Pond, and that, you know, like the Troupple King, you have some expectations for what that's like, and that's a new stage layout. And so we also wanted it to, I don't know, we came up with that new lore and that new world. That's it.
And Sean drew a big gigantic King Birder on a whiteboard for a long time.
Definitely. The idea of it being like, I'm gonna die again. Yeah.
Nice.
The idea of it being like a character that just had a shawl loosely attached, and you're like not sure if that's really supposed to be what it is, I think was just appealing. So the Bull Knight is, yeah, like he's a contractor, or he's a, yeah, his response, I'm not looking for new work, is kind of, I think, was a Jake line, since he's works with a lot of different projects, and, you know, that's something you have to contend with. We did originally talk about whether we would have a character like King Pridemore or Cooper or King Knight's mom in Showdown, but at the end of the day, King of Cards was still too new, and so we weren't able to settle on a character to make sure that they could both be made in parallel. King Pridemore, it'd be fun, yeah, if he had his armor, but he could lose it, he'd have to go get it, but he would be like, that seems like a Showdown 2 kind of thing. He'd be a much larger character. And likewise for like Mom or Cooper, those aren't characters that fight, so we'd have to make up a whole new move set. And we wanted to focus on characters you already knew about in Showdown, so that you experience what it's like to play as a character that you already played in another game. This sub-weapon was relatively painless to put in because our code base is already set up to work on a time step, and so you could slow it down. The extra work, they got 2 talks. The extra work went into flagging objects that shouldn't slow down, or things that like come from the player himself, or oh, I forgot to messed up.
No.
We'll never see Missy jump.
Never see Missy.
And so yeah, it just came from flagging a few extra things. I think if we talk to Creech, you'll get a joke that we've repeated a few times. I have a good feeling this juice bar is going to be around for a long time. The joke being that the tower falls following the events of Shovel.
Wow, wow.
Classic Yako joke.
Neo's saying you should go pet the dog.
Okay, we'll go pet the dog, or Mimic. If you hold down next to Mimic,
He looks around.
Then he pets Fox. That's all part of putting in things in the hub that are extra surprises or things you want to do each time. Something just to add a little bit more compelling fun to it.
Very cute. So many people didn't know you could pet him.
Next time you're playing Specter of Torment, pet that fox. If there's one thing you take away from this stream, I hope it's that you can do that. We'll just gloss over this major plot revelation and instead talk about the cool fox. Yeah, Dark Acolyte's back.
Shifty eyes. The name is based on a fennec fox, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a cross between Mimic from like D&D and a fennec fox. That's where it comes from, Mimic. That's a special intro where he hops out of there. It's the only time we do it. But I like because it feels like you're dropping in, the enemies are at the ready, it feels like a major change of pace. These are all supposed to be jail cells because this is the hole Dark Acolyte comes out of. So you can imagine that he was maybe tied up or, you know, imprisoned in one of these, and you can really feel like it's not a place you want to be since it's a villain's lair. I don't know why there's bubbles. I think it's because mechanically it's more fun.
Why are Liquid Samurais trapped in these cells?
I think Liquid Samurais are the guards, and they are stopping Specter now. This music is so cool. It's such a cool driving tune to get you excited for it.
For the relics and things, how was it decided what kinds of optional powers are helpful enough and which break the challenge too much?
It's usually a case by case. We normally don't undo a design decision. Like, if we want to make a relic that flies, then we'll try to make that work. If we want to make a relic that slows down time, we want to make that work. It's very rare that we would just say, we're not going to do, like, we tried it, we're taking it out and starting over from the beginning. So a lot of times we just take the core idea, like, this relic, the feather, should help you reach jumps that you couldn't make normally. And we tune it so that it's a little more, it's friendly to use, and it helps in a way that doesn't make it too broken. A lot of times those relief can come in different ways. Whether it like isn't as helpful, like for instance, the booming horn does a lot of damage to enemies, but it does very little damage to bosses because we didn't want you to just spam A and beat bosses. In some cases, we increase the magic costs, so it's just more expensive to use, so you know that you can only rely on it for certain situations, and we sort of go from there. But usually the goal is to keep the original inspiration or design goal intact and make it balanced however we can. But for us, a lot of times, we're okay that it breaks stuff. That's what makes it fun. It's fun that you can use this ability in a way that really obviates the challenge if you know how to look for it. And since we have achievements and feats for being in the game without them, you can still, if you're that type of player that wants to try that challenge, you know what that experience is like. You know what it's like to just play Shovel of Hope with just the shovel. Oop. Right.
Nick is asking what does TMK stand for again?
Turn my key. For the robot?
Yeah.
Turn my key.
Yeah, TMK 500, yeah.
Turn my key 500. Because that's the original line that we wanted to have in the game from very early on in Shovel of Hope. The Judgment Rush is such a cool relic. We put it in because we originally came up with the design idea because that's an attack that Specter Knight uses in his own boss battle in Shovel of Hope. And so we're just like, well, obviously it should like rush forward and to the nearest enemy. We're like, well, should it like stop at collision? And we thought, no, that would be like too unfriendly to use. Maybe if enemies always exist outside of collision and you can always dash to it, then it'll be safe. And we put it in. I put it in, and we made some tweaks for it. And I'm surprised at how effective it remains to this day, and not broken. I really like how that one turned out. I think the only thing we did is like limit the range. Maybe a very early GIF early on. You like Specter Knight starts in Pridemore and presses A and goes like 3 screens to the right and hits an enemy. But I like it because it's powerful, but you understand where it's going to go and how it's going to work. You use the dash / ability particle effect, so you know what to read and you understand where Specter Knight's going to go and what he's going to do when he reaches there, which is dash upwards.
Oh, someone said the Shovel Knight has the best music.
That's awesome. I agree. Jake does amazing work. David was here. He can tell you about how he made this background effect work with new... Whoop.
Oh.
Okay, we're good. Where it gradually turns on over time. Waz also helped make this possible. Remember, we don't use alpha transparency in this game. We don't set things to like different opacities. So this is all done with, I think, palette effects, where the different colors turn on and off. Maybe with one final layer snapping on and off to attention. I'm not sure.
Nick says, I made a bunch of pellets and said, hey, David, make this happen. And he was like,
Totally worth it, then.
Does Big Kaufman have anything to do with the Bard?
Yeah, I think when we came up with the Bard, we try to imagine what the voice is for a lot of characters, and we considered Jake to be the voice of the Bard in a lot of ways. And so a lot of his asides and a lot of his technical delivery and joke deliveries come from Jake himself.
In fact, Jake usually does a pass at the writing in almost every campaign, I think, at this point.
That's right. And usually whatever he writes up for the Bard, so long as it's not meant to be gameplay leading, like direct inference, he gets to... We usually let him have at it. So this boss fight is a boss fight I made. I apologize in advance if you aren't a fan, but I think it turns out to be pretty neat. Full disclosure is I don't think any of these were... this boss fight originally started off with the idea that Black Knight would be able to change the elevation of the ground and use different attacks based on like making different stair steps and collision. So you can see the elevator at the bottom is like multi-segmented because we'd imagine different layers would raise and lower up, so you'd use your climbing ability. And he would like knock Terrapin down and he would like descend the stairs, and so you'd have to anticipate what attack was coming. In the end though, there wasn't a lot of choice you could have just because Terrapin couldn't like navigate, he wouldn't be able to climb it up it. Black Knight would just use his normal attacks. And overall, I just personally wasn't really feeling where it was going. But one of the things it was is that Terrapin would be able to fly into the air so that they could reset the stair pattern. And so I instead took that and ran with it, much to, I don't know, to create a different effect. When I was making this, I wanted it to have a immediate reaction, so when you were hitting the boss, you would see like an immediate like pinball like knockaway effect. And I think overall it ended up feeling more like a Robotnik boss than a lot of other bosses we do in the game, where you're like, Sonic hits him and you see him ping away and you could like sort of almost get a hit in, but you feel like maybe you have to recalibrate what you're doing in a way that uses Terrapin and Black Knight souped up for him in a different way. I still really like how it turned out, but I know that on a New Game Plus run especially, or with low health, it can be challenging because it feels a little out of your control when you're allowed to hit Black Knight or when you can get a good hit in because of this ping-ponging. But, yeah. I feel like there's a lot of ways to get cheats, extra hits in, a lot of ways to use projectiles.
Who was asking, how do you determine which attacks or patterns from a boss should be quote-unquote random, and which should be to make the fight feel better?
It's normally up to the programmer's entire discretion. Sometimes, if an attack, we normally think about the attacks in terms of what the player can anticipate and how hard they are to dodge. And so, if an attack feels like it's out of nowhere and it always hits the player, we don't want him to do that every 2 seconds, unless it's a boss fight about avoiding that attack. Likewise, if there's an attack if it's a boss where we want to condition the player to jump, but then have a punishment when you're too jumpy, then we want to use the attacks in different ways to make that all pan together.
Oh.
It's Gull! I hope he gets that kiss of death right.
Smooch.
Get smooch, Specter Knight. Aw, man. Now he's double dead.
Oh.
A lot of this came from David's, when we were just thinking about new characters to populate the hub. I think Gaul came from David, so I can't speak too much to his design. We knew Dancer needed to be Inspector of Torment because in Shovel of Hope, she's the one who requests that you defeat Specter Knight. And so we knew that we needed to connect that circuit, which is something we're always focused on in terms of, well, why would she be mad at Specter Knight? And we thought about maybe she could have like an obvious house in the Lich Yard, or she could be in the ending, or I don't know, there's some like kind of plot. But we settled on connecting it to her dance. But Specter Knight hates it.
Your fairy is definitely...
The fairy hates it too. He's not having it. But now this is fun because if you see this dance again in Shovel Knight, you're connecting all of it. Again, whenever we do a dance, I'm always upset that they have to exist on the same tile height, so I tried to add a little bit more jumping at the end. Makes me ill. This is no place for your foolish mirth. Be gone. Wanted to be escorted. It's so cold.
And then she's out of there.
That exit though, I'm so sorry.
No.
She couldn't just walk out. She didn't have a walk animation. But now you can just be defiant and cool whenever you want. And tall.
Now you just pose wherever you want.
What's up? Oh, just posing. Let's try to get Dragon Knight.
There you go.
Talks about the mechanics that he does. Gonna work for Plague Knight. We probably won't get to see his end actually.
There's no.
Oh, we gotta go do Scarlet.
Oh, you still have the dance. Oh, that's right. Can't forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, she's back. Specter Knight just having to deal with all these dances. Although I imagine for Red, he's polite. He wouldn't be mean to Red about this. I'm sure he feels it's very heartfelt. So yeah, the characters are very grounded during the dance. They go back and forth. Now imagine this dance getting put together while we have a hard ship date and 10 bugs every day, every hour. And it's like, oh no, it's like, is Specter Knight's jump breaking here? Is his climbing working? Is the clemency armor not repairing? Or not putting you back in the right spot? And then also make this fun dance. You can see the red skulls do fall in place. They don't just appear. They actually come from the top and land so that they all form the chorus in the back.
I remember you being up really late actually doing this one.
I was definitely up at 4 in the morning because the work day is for fixing bugs. But it's a sweet ending. I hope everyone enjoys it.
It's really nice. It's cute.
I like that it ends up being a little more grounded and focused. And it feels a little more sincere from the characters, like they're not showing off. And that's by the way, this is Specter Knight being polite. The most he can muster is not not actually outbursting about it. You could talk to Scarlet if you want to really see the dance again. It's cool.
Do you think if Shovel Knight ever learned the sentimental value of the face locket, would he return it?
Yes. I don't think Shovel Knight would be cruel to anyone like that. I think if he heard it plainly and Specter Knight was willing to track him down and not make a big deal over it, or like plead his case earnestly, Shovel Knight would return the kindness. But oftentimes in the Shovel Knight world, battles are at the forefront. Plague Knight would pawn it for juice, though. It's like, oh, that's cool, but how much gunpowder can it get me? It's like, no, that's like Specter Knight's keepsake. That's like means a lot to him. It's like the only tether he has to the living world. And he's like, so like a lot of gunpowder or like a little gunpowder? Either way, I'm here to barter.
Why bring the flying blocks room back?
Because Specter Knight deals with collision and he climbs. And so I feel like this is just an element of the Enchantress's power that is worth reinforcing in this area. Yeah, I think it's iconic for the finale scene. Since Enchantress summons blocks literally too for her fight, I feel like that kind of geomancy is just like inner power. Or towermancy. It makes the tower feel more like a living entity and less like a living entity with like malice and less like a structure that evil beings are inhabiting. You can do something fun at the end there. If you can clip the side while it rises up, you'll go really high into the air, which is fun and cool.
You come back down?
You do come down. It's not that high. We capped it.
Okay, good.
But Specter Knight has, when a platform's moving, it's like a moving platform's going up, say at like a modest speed. If you grab the side of it and you kipped over it, you would want to be able to land on the platform. So Specter Knight gets a small boost based on the platform he's grabbing onto if it's moving upward on Y, so that he could actually make it on. I think that's pretty rare in the game, but it does happen, especially in the Explodatorium. And so since that elevator moves up so quickly, the speed that he gets is really high. And so he goes up a pretty good distance. That's an example of cool player mobility that you probably don't notice. Our writing comes from the team. A lot of times when we're putting in different encounters or NPCs, different members of the team write in the dialogue, either temporarily or permanently. And sometimes that goes on to be finalized, and sometimes we reevaluate it. A lot of times we also do group playthroughs of the entire game from start to finish, and we make notes about what we think should be clear or what elements aren't coming through in the story, and then we take it through many, many phases. I would say we're all pretty invested in how we tell the story and what the characters do and say. Furby, the blocks that move into place statically, those are all visual, but the elevator that moves up is actually blocks moving into place. We have an article on Rock, Paper, Shotgun, the mechanic segment. They did an interview with David about designing this boss 4 times for the Enchantress. If you're interested in learning more about it, I would recommend checking it out. But we wanted to make sure that it's a fitting finale. We wanted there to be familiar elements so the Enchantress doesn't feel like she has new powers every time. And there are new challenges that leverage the character's abilities. And so that balance could be really difficult. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Oh, sorry, I was just thinking about how if you throw out this guy and then taunt, he'll do hearts. Maybe not during this boss fight.
What?
If you do the cool pose in front of him, hearts appear.
Really?
Right there. See?
Oh.
Hold on. Gosh darn it. And,
No.
okay, now we can finally see it. Jeez, it's really important. Okay. The hearts will appear.
Aww.
And I think he does the cool pose too, this other fairy. I thought hearts appeared on the small fairy too, but that's not the case. And the idea is that Specter Knight's so cool and skeletons love him.
Do the taunts have any other practical use?
No. The goal of the taunts are that they're a fun visual aesthetic, so you can act how you want to act, and can explore more about how the character might interact with the world.
How did the design for Dark Reese's final form come to be?
I can't speak too much to that. I think generally, since Specter Knight is a more somber tale, the idea of making something nightmarish or haunting, like imagery of I don't know, of like a ghostly form or a horrific monster kind of thing, took the forefront, and that's where I went from there. Most of the final bosses are like that. Like Plague of Shadows is also like similarly unsettling, but we wanted there to be a feeling of when Specter Knight makes the choice to sacrifice himself to save Reese, we wanted the player to connect with the same sentiment and feel that, like, whoa, like Reese is like really going through some hard times. This is like not good. This is like not a good state to be in, and that makes Specter Knight's choice all the more meaningful because he's saving him from that fate. Likewise, I imagine Enchantress is like intentionally twisting it in a way that would pull at Specter Knight's heartstrings like that. Oh, we're good. We're good.
You need to focus.
Nope. Yeah.
Nice.
Pose for the fans. Oh, it looks like we're all crossing our arms here. Oh, welcome to the crossing your arm party, Dark Reese.
Too bad you got a skeleton in your face, though.
Yeah, well, that's all right. I'm not going to complain about having a skeleton in my face.
How long has Reese lived with the Hedge family, and how come he doesn't live with Luon?
I can't talk about specific canonical stuff.
Oh, okay.
Use your imagination. A lot of sub-weapons for this boss fight had to get specifically changed for it, since how Specter Knight's moving. He's going fast, so a lot of the relics would, like, you'd throw the sickle and it would go nowhere and just travel behind you. So we added extra velocity to it based on the speed you're going. That, you know, some of like the Judgment Rush needed a little bit more coding to work. Had to do a lot of extra work just to make sure this was a little bit more worked how you expected. Since it's such a one-off idea, we wanted to make sure you were still able to use abilities comfortably. David could talk more. He was the one who put together this boss. I just worked on the player stuff. So you could talk more about how the rail segments work. A lot of this boss was originally much harder, but since it's a entirely new play style and mechanic, we didn't want to make you feel like you had to grind out a billion matches against Dark Reese to finally learn how to beat him. We want it to be an enjoyable falling action section. Plus, that's like, you know, there's some, it's asking a lot from you.
So is this actually moving looping level, not just automatically looping rails?
This is, it's like, imagine it's going through the same 3 screens over and over again, and the rails are pragmatically placed. Oop. So this is a stupid deal, but you can see here it's a 7 of 8. The reason it's a 7 of 8. Then pause here. It's flashing. It says 8 of 8. So you can see that it's like happening in real time.
So there are many surprised people.
I'm
right
sorry,
now.
you have to know this information. And now it says 8 of 8, and it's blue. So it went from red, the color it was throughout this game, the whole time, to blue, the color that it is in Shovel of Hope in all of them, in real time, based on the script. You have to know this. It's important that you know this. The reason that I did that is because on the Wii U and 3DS, you have access to the inventory throughout the entire cutscene. We don't turn off the bottom screen when you're doing cutscenes. And so you could open it and say, like, well, it still says 7 of 8. Why? Like, that's inaccurate. And you'd be looking at the whole time. So I went through and added 3 flags that get checked only during that scene where you can see and put together. That's the only time you can see the blue phase locket in Specter of Torment.
That was a pretty late ad too, wasn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's like around bug fixing time.
Yeah.
And so I hope you enjoy that fun, cool detail.
Actually, I didn't know about the flashing. That one I didn't know about.
So, well, once you had a value called locket state, it's like, well, okay, locket state transforming. For these flyby scenes, as we call them, we normally put them all together and time them out, and then send them to Jake to do the music accompaniment. So he scores it all based on the antics that we put in. It's always great because I feel every time I see these, it really feels like a fitting curtain call for all the hard work we did. See King Knight turning his castle gold. King Pridemore actually took him up on sweeping the floors. You can see Dark Acolyte pleading to be returned to the Tropical King's lead. I did this scene, I love it, because it's a whole big siege on the castle. And since I put the Phantom Striker, all the bosses in, I feel like having this cool action scene. This is one of the few cases where you see Red and Scarlet in the background, disapproving of the invasion. That's one of the few cases in pre-King of Cards where the flybys would change based on your progress in the game. In King of Cards, we explore that more with Mr. Hat's shop. Okay. Plot problems.
And also who's in the hammocks afterwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's Cooper throwing the rose, which we connect the circuit on that in King of Cards. I love this change in theme.
I really like the scene.
This is really great. Connecting the circuits on Plague of Shadows.
So nervous.
Mole Knight's Lost City hot tub, which also gets explored more in King of Cards.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, weirdly enough. I imagine this scene is pretty complicated for players that start with Specter of Torment, because you're just like, the heck is this? But I think it was important for us to show the Enchantress laying siege so you can see why they built up the walls, why they were a little more on edge. This scene, you can see he's taking large swords, taking the edges of them and attaching little jets to them. So it's an incredibly wasteful process, but it makes knives. And you can see the flying machine being built, or the propeller knights. Rats. Sorry.
The sign knives are in
They're-
so many things now.
They're in Double Dragon Neon
They're inside of Blood Rain.
and Blood Rain Betrayal. Sign knives have been with us for a long time. Let's see, what's another... Oh, speaking of random HUD things, in Plague of Shadows, when you get the Pandemonium Cloak, because I have no one else to tell this information to. In Plague of Shadows, when you get the Pandemonium Cloak, if you pause the game, it shows all of his options and they keep flickering randomly, like they cycle through at different intervals, because you can't choose the option, so it's like unstable.
Whoa.
The reason I put that in is because while I was putting in the Pandemonium Cloak, I was watching two best friends play, playing Deadly Premonition. And at a certain point in that game, things go haywire. When you pause, the menu's going nuts and the clock's going crazy in your inventory. And I thought that was so cool that I put it in Plague of Shadows.
Oh, was that really around Plague of Shadows?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Now the locket's blue. You can see Specter Knight is giving up ever facing the Enchantress. He's kind of resigned to his fate. That way, when Shovel Knight returns, you can kind of get a little bit more of a clearer picture on where Specter Knight's coming from and why he would serve her and continue on with what he's doing. And then, there we go. He becomes Specter Knight. And he became a wallpaper.
Did you consider anything crazy with the Will Skull in New Game Plus?
Nope. We pretty much knew that it wouldn't work given the mechanics of New Game Plus, and so there wasn't really a way to balance it to make it work. So we decided to just make it off the menu. Oh, speaking of, here, wait right there.
Empty couch, no! Sorry, everyone. I don't know where Ian's going. Something is getting pulled out of the display cabinet.
I apologize because this was given to us by a fan who cosplay, but I don't know their name to credit them. But they made this lovely phase locket.
Down a little more.
It's nice and hefty. It's the right scale given like the in-game sprite where you like clutch it in your hands. It has this lovely chain over it. And they gave this to us after cosplaying during, I think, PAX.
It was during one, I forget which PAX it was.
Detail on it too.
It was really sweet of them, and
it was such a delight.
it was such a good Specter Knight too. It was amazing.
Actually, we have a Plague Knight staff too that was given to us by a similar fan, but
He
a different
actually
person.
came right up to our door too. It said, "I tried to mail it, but it was too bulky, so I just drove over."
It's so great. I'm sorry I don't know their name. Hold on.
Oh, good. Ian was able to get the Plague Knight staff. Okay, this is really cool. Here, I'll make the camera bigger.
We have the greatest fans. Everyone is amazing. So this is a nice, usable Plague Knight staff.
It's actually full height. It's like
It's got a nice grip here with a little purple.
you gotta back up a little bit. Oh, there you go. There you go. Perfect.
The eyes are perfect. The face, the card captor-ness.
He like came over. He was very nervous about giving it to us and meeting us and everything, and he just randomly came up to our door and knocked and was like, "I made this for you."
Combine them together and you have infinite power.
It was really great.
It's delightful and amazing.
Now they forever will sit inside of our display cabinet and be a focus.
The locket does not open up though. It is a solid physical thing. So yeah, if Specter Knight, if you're ever in Los Angeles and you want your locket back, you should find us on our About page. Specter Knight's the only campaign that has the favorite sub-weapon listed in the stats. The reason is because we felt with Specter Knight you would probably hone in on one relic and upgrade it and keep it as your standby. You'd like say, I like this one, I'm going to put money into it. And so by putting that in the credits, we lean a little more into that where you're like, yeah, I really use the sickle, that's my favorite. That was a focus for us.
What relic did you end up with most of the time?
Throwing sickle on this one, I think.
Ooh.
Although I don't think I used it that much. I don't know. It was probably something completely different. I wasn't paying attention. So you can see here, now his headquarters is flooded. It's maybe seen better days, and he's placing his locket there. There's a bit more connection going on here. You can see the ladder underneath, the water here. The reason this isn't a halfway state is because by the time in Plague of Shadows that you go to this area, the water completely fills up and that chest is there. So we had to do some work to kind of connect the idea that this area is under siege and is getting worse day by day and is looking less and less like humans lived here. Yeah, it's sad. This was his base, and once the Enchantress got into power, this was all steamrolled.
Oh, the scene. The sad, sad scene.
Then get to learn the basis of it all. Oh no, where is it?
No.
They're sitting so far apart, though. It's so hard to hear each other. Although that bonfire is huge. So. Aww.
Sad. Sad, sad, sad.
I'll ruin that with bad trivia. This is the first time where the end got written out horizontally rather than vertically, where it's the end underneath it, because it wouldn't have been bound. We wanted the tower to be visible in the background, and we didn't want it to overlap this. So Woz had to remake the entire animation, where it's moved slightly to the right. But we ended up using it again for King of Cards. So. Curtain. I hope you enjoyed this reminiscing about Specter of Torment. I could probably jump into the new Specter Knight Challenge levels if you haven't seen them, since we added new ones with King of Cards. So we start at 6 through 10 are all new.
Bye, Woz.
Bye, Woz. Thanks for joining us. Pro Scythe Slidin' was, since Specter Knight we talk a lot about Tony Hawk Pro Skater. The idea behind this was making a level that felt like a skate park, where you had to get all the objects in one clean run, where you had to plan each run and how you're going to go about it. And so the idea here is that it is a castle-based skate park. Also, a lot of people really responded well to the grind armor, the rail mail, and so we wanted to make sure that there was a challenge that really took advantage of the fact that you can use it on spikes, that you can really use it in such a way. I think it turned out pretty cool. Whoop.
All these challenges look tough.
It's challenge mode. It's not. We always joke when someone says that they're tough. We say it's challenge mode, not having fun mode. Of course, the goal being that we would hope you would have fun by the challenge. We usually try not to make them too demanding, though. Whoop, I'm supposed to do a U-flip. We generally try to make them as fast as we can do them, and then add a lot of extra time or variables to it, just so you don't have to be pixel perfect to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, typically everyone tries to make sure at least like those of us that don't play the game daily are able to get through these, at least with some difficulty, but not impossible.
Definitely. So there's one where you have to contend with Lunkaroth for the entire screen. This stage gives me Super Mario World Ghost Ship vibes, just because of the just the palette and being underwater in a pirate ship.
Oh.
I'm not going to do this one too much just because I'm bad at it, obviously, and because it's an auto-scroll and it'll take a lot of time. These are a mainstay staple, where we have these in every game, like Heir to the Throne and in Plague Knight, where it's a nice circuit where you just kind of get into a rhythm and try to do your best to get all the gems. We knew a lot of players responded positively towards dash slashing through cannonballs, and so we wanted a challenge that made that a frequent thing. Don't worry, you don't have to get every gem.
Good. Actually, do you want to tell everyone how slicing cannonballs came around?
Alec just put it in.
Yeah.
Alec, as we talked about, was the new level designer on the project for Specter of Torment, but he also has some coding experience, and so he just thought it up and put it in one day. And then I had to tell him that he left all of his variables uninitialized, and he needs to check with us when he does stuff like that. And the rest is history.
It's stuck.
Yeah, and it looks great, and it's awesome. This challenge, the idea was to make it very Castlevania feeling. You can't attack, but you can throw a sickle, kind of like throwing a cross out, and you can see the level is a little more like ground-based and less like a Specter Knight verticality or a Shovel Knight dense collision. So it's more like an adventure where you're tackling enemies and trying to avoid damage, but also putting the sickle through its paces and how it can be used. I really like this challenge.
What's your favorite challenge?
I don't know if I have a favorite challenge. I'm sorry.
Not even Vito's Big Break or like, I don't know. No.
I think if there's one thing you can take away from this stream is we work on all the content, and so it's really tough for us to have favorites. I think it's rare that we just say, this is my favorite thing. I'm sorry, that's such a boring answer.
No. Is a sign dagger movement actually programmed as a sign function?
Yes. Or it wasn't at first, but now it is. Oh yeah. Pipes and patience. Oh boy, says the player. I can't wait. It is another classic mainstay. It's a level where you can't attack, and you only have 1 health, but you have to dodge all these perilous attacks.
Gosh, I'm terrible at these. Every time you guys make one, it's like,
We're usually consistent in the number of screens. Oh my gosh.
Fairies, no! Go away,
This is
fairies.
very rude.
God, no, gosh.
Sorry.
Is that dragon changing velocity? No,
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 it's
he's
how
doing his normal
he
thing.
just eases in and out.
Okay.
All right, home free.
Ugh. No.
Yeah, 1 shot. Hopefully that redeems my Lunkeroth failure. No, someone asks if there's ever confusion that there's 2 different things called fairies. No, we've kind of squared it away in our head. I think we normally call the fairies that bite at you encroachers in code, and so we're used to that. Since someone asked, we can also look at Specter of Torment challenge levels unlocked with the Specter Knight amiibo. Amiibo! There, TM. Now, oh yeah.
Axolotl.
We'll start and work backwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So with the amiibo, we put the Lich Lord armor on to help accentuate that it's that. We also normally mix in more types of content, so you can see this is actually using King of Cards assets and the music for the Truffle Pond, and so that makes it feel a little more fanciful.
I love this song. This was a very good song when it came in.
Is definitely something I've done in like a Mario world during one of the castle stages, but not with a cool wall climb. Whoa, it's getting faster! Oh god!
Do it!
Bleh.
Nice. Someone was asking if Specter Torment was a launch title on Switch, and it was.
It was.
It was one of, I don't know, not too many actually.
Maybe like 5 or 7 titles, I forget.
Yeah.
Ring around the birder. Use the Chronos coin to collect all the gold while avoiding the birders. Oh yeah, I'm probably not going to do this one.
Oh my gosh.
This is a rare. I think this is the only time where the double break long brick is used. Oh. It's gonna run out.
No.
Okay, let's try that again.
Where did you get the idea of Specter Knight breaking blocks by jumping?
Well, we know already that how blocks work in the game, and we knew like Shovel Knight could break blocks by jumping and down thrusting, and Plague Knight would have bombs that he could throw and break. But for Specter Knight, we
Oh.
is a very difficult challenge. For Specter Knight, we didn't want to give him a down attack because that's not what he was about. Whoop, great. And so we thought about, well, maybe like if you jump and press down, you'd like put his heel out and you could break blocks intentionally, but it can't hit enemies. But we didn't want to make it feel like the shovel drop. So we thought about just making it automatic instead, and we arrived at where we're at. The trick came from level design, where like we really had to hammer it home and make it a. We had to have a lot of. Whoa, it's real tough.
Oh my.
Sorry, we had to have a lot of setups that really teach the mechanic and really drive it home how it works, so that as a player you're not surprised when it does happen. No!
I was also wondering if the red birders are unbreakable.
Red birders can never be defeated. They uniquely show up in challenge mode, so you don't think that you should just hammer square on them. This one's fun too.
Oh, this one's a good one. I like this one.
Oh,
Whoop, whoop.
you can't attack in this one. You can only use the hover plume.
Although I think you kind of...
Ah, we're good.
Are you sure?
There's no timer.
Well, no, I mean like your darkness.
I'm fine.
Okay.
See, like this will fill me up to full.
Do the Axolotl take inspiration from the snake stages and from Battletoads?
No, I don't think so. I think they were just... since King Knight involves collision for bashing and spinning, I think that idea just came about. Oops, I'm doing very poorly. This is a mechanic.
You're flat.
Sorry, we'll do it again. Alright. This was definitely a challenge stage where the designer set out to make the feather something that wasn't a crux or a crutch, but instead something that felt like it had its own challenge in and of itself. You had to get used to the timing of it, how you could stall with it, making sure you didn't like overuse it. It kind of feels like a Super Mario World like tubular stage in some ways, just because of the anxiety of waiting for it to run out and reaching the next gasp of air. I like it.
Is the worst.
Turned out great.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're doing fine. We're doing great. There we go.
Nice. Oh gosh.
Money mirror. Yeah, this was a lot of times for the challenges since challenges are more micro-sized, we focus on making a specific object or sub-weapon challenge. And so this one is the upgraded mirror ended up being collecting pickups. So how could we extend that to make it something that you have to think about constantly? That's also sort of the benefit of the amiibo challenges is... Oh, wait, I gotta go pick it up.
There you go.
A lot of these abilities aren't fully formed yet when we're making challenge levels normally. Like maybe we didn't know what the upgraded mirror would be, so we're not ready to make like a whole set of mechanics over it. Right. But making these in hindsight, we were able to focus on areas of the game that we normally didn't get to press on. Sorry, I'm a little distracted.
Oop. Tim's asking how was your guys' day?
It's been pretty good. I've been...
Ooh.
Okay, we're good. Hold on. We've been just trying to make sure 4.1 is ready to go on all the platforms, responding to any issues or bugs. And so that's where we're at. A lot of people were at PAX this weekend. I was not.
I just flew in yesterday, so I'm on East Coast time and feeling weird.
So we haven't been... Yeah, there we go. So that's pretty much where we've been at. But it's exciting to have everyone back. It's cool. I hope you get a chance to check out Multiplayer Justice. I hope you enjoy it. Leaping Lanterns. This is one of the stages that you can see a time-lapse video build out in the Specter of Torment mobility design. See Alec build this block by block, set to some music. Ooh. Okay, just trying to get some height here.
There you go. Flying Rage, if you want to know what's in 4.1, actually, if you look at the patch notes for Shovel Knight, listed right now since it's out on Steam.
Yep.
And yeah.
Highlights include a character gauntlet mode for Showdown, where you change characters every time you break a target, and Joustus Free Play, where you are able to play Joustus against a friend or against yourself in solitaire mode. It's also available on our website called New Features Come to Shovel Knight. One last thing I'm going to jump into is New Game Plus for Specter Knight.
Ooh.
So in this, darkness and will are fused together as one ever-depleting resource.
I like this one, actually. I think that this New Game Plus is probably my favorite.
I really like where it turned out. If you played this, if you stepped into New Game Plus, I hope you enjoyed it. The impetus for this was something that I just wanted to put together while we were wrapping up the final form of the game. I think originally we were just planning on it being a normal New Game Plus like anything else. But originally when we pitched, well, look at that HUD. So if you've never seen this, in this mode, your HP and MP, as it were, are all combined into one thing. So, and it ticks down throughout the whole match. So you see if I take damage, it goes down. And likewise, if I use a sub-weapon, it also goes down a little bit. When I defeat enemies, though, since MP is HP, I get health back. Likewise, if I reach a checkpoint, I'll get it back. So this creates a Strider PS2 or Shinobi PS2 levels of pressure and allows you to use your sub-weapons in ways you might not have expected. A cool part about it is if you completely run out of sub-weapon, you can't die by the timer. So if you just wait and sit there until it totally reaches 0, you'll die when you take the next hit. Likewise, if you don't have enough magic to use a sub-weapon, you can use it anyway. And so this can allow you to use a lot of sub-weapons infinitely, so long as you're really confident about not getting hit or getting to the next health pickup. And so I think this was a huge success, or I really like how it turned out personally. It allows you to use the sub-weapons, it allows for a new challenge. I guess the Judgment Rush you can't use infinitely. I don't remember the balance reason behind that, I'm sorry. Probably because it's invulnerable. Yeah, there's like some of the sub-weapons you can't because the benefit makes you invulnerable, and so if you could use the Feather infinitely, then you couldn't do it. Judgment Rush also has an invulnerability power in the upgraded form.
And Will Skull got pulled out, of course.
Will Skull you just can't use. I put a red X on it from Plague of Shadows when you overheat, because since you would be spending magic to get HP, it wouldn't make any sense. And now I died. And so the reason this design made it through is that when we originally pitched all of the potential campaigns, for Dig the Vote on Kickstarter, we opened it up and allowed all the backers to choose which characters they wanted to be playable, and we opened it up to a big poll. But we didn't want players just to pick on their design, we wanted to pick on gameplay too. So we had a big brainstorming session and we all wrote down our possible ideas for what we'd maybe expect. We said like Specter Knight would be like a serious story, and he would like have attacks that consume his HP, but he would be like a glass cannon where you had to make sure that you didn't take any careless hits and things like that. So this New Game Plus was kind of a way to make good on that promise retroactively and add in a mode where it does play a little bit more like that. That was in a way bigger than a cheat. In addition, I talked about a few times where every campaign, everyone's working tirelessly to just add a few more surprises and a few more tricks so that it doesn't feel just like whatever Shovel Knight was mapped to a new character that's red. And adding a new twist around New Game Plus as something completely unexpected was another way that we could add a bit more joy and surprise into the game. And so that maybe you were excited to tackle it rather than feeling like another thing you had to check mark off as you move forward. It's difficult when we do that though, because when people look at the game in summation for Treasure Trove, you would play Specter of Torment and then be retroactively disappointed that Plague of Shadows doesn't have that twist, or that Shovel of Hope doesn't have that twist. But I think in the long run, it's stronger that each game has that texture where there are some features where we take a different direction or we take a different approach, rather than taking the same limited ideas and just mapping it out to every campaign. So I hope in the long run everyone enjoys that there's contrast and difference between everything. But I could understand that maybe you'd want a new change in Plague of Shadows, or would want a new feature in Shovel of Hope like that. The reason that you get all your darkness and will back at a checkpoint is, in this mode, is that when we were charting it out, we realized that 9 times out of 10, you would just kill yourself whenever you reached a checkpoint. Because you'd be like, well, I'll never get more darkness and will than what I have right now in this run, so I might as well jump into the pit, collect my stuff, and go again. So we thought just returning all of it to you would help promote just keep going, don't worry about like min-maxing it. I think it worked out okay. The funny thing is, I think for most players, when by the time they get to New Game Plus, they already have all the HP and magic upgrades. So they're used to seeing this health bar all the way filled up. But it actually does use all of your collectibles up to that point to form the total health. So if you missed a will skull, it would be a little shorter. If you missed an HP skull, it would be a little shorter. And it would still benefit to get you them in New Game Plus.
Someone's saying, I always wanted to play the original crafting version of Plague of Shadows.
Yeah, that would be cool. I think the trick is that there was no such thing. We had the idea in, but we never made levels or stages based around it because we realized early on that it wouldn't be that compelling. Imagine like that you only had 3 uses of Big Boom tied to like a currency rather than to the alchemy meter, and when you die, you lost everything. And you probably have a clearer idea then. But yeah, if you want to see more about that, we have a whole article on our website, Designing Perfect Mechanics, where we talk about Plague Knight early iterations. All right. I think that's about it, though, for our stream. We'll just leave
So
with
much so you're
two cool dudes crossing their arms, as we were previously. We did pretty good on achievements.
Yeah. Not bad for this casual playthrough.
Yeah. Do you have anything cool in the achievements when we put it together? We have some classics in there that are universal. I remember Make a Killing was something I came up with. It was one where I wanted, since Specter Knight's like a run-based game that you played linearly, I wanted to make something where you're kind of going for a score attack. And so we came up with these rule sets where you couldn't grind gold, but you had to play through and end up with a certain amount of gold at the end. I think I like that one a lot, how it turned out. Yeah, other than that, that's about it. Wait, I can show you one last thing. Okay, so in Treasure Trove...
Just like the game. Just like, wait, one more
One
thing.
more thing. This is very important. First off, someone asked if there an ETA on 4.1. We're releasing 4.1 as it becomes available on every platform. It's already out on PS4 and Xbox One and PC and Steam and Windows 10. It'll be out on additional platforms as they come back as safe for release. That could be any couple of weeks from now. But we don't have an ETA because it really varies based on the platform holder and what's discovered in tests. So, this is really silly, but in the original Shovel Knight, as we added more campaigns, we changed the title screen to show the last campaign you played as. But that confused the heck out of players because they thought that since the game said Shovel Knight Specter of Torment, even though they went in and chose a file and chose Specter Knight, they thought they were locked in, which I totally get, totally understand. That's why we changed it. So now it says Treasure Trove. But if you ever want to change it back because we don't know what we're doing with our lives, if you press R 2 times and then hold it the 3rd time, 1, 2, 3. Or is it L?
Uh-oh.
1, 2, 3.
I need to push something else.
No.
No?
Select 1, 2. Maybe it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Uh-oh.
Very cool. Very cool.
There really is something here. I've seen it work before.
Maybe it's 20. I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm being real cool. It's on the dev wiki.
Oh, it is on Deadwood.
It's not select. It was select. It's too hard to press left and right and select, so we changed it before shipping.
It's select, is what Waz is saying.
It's not select. I just said that.
Okay.
That clears all the options. Was.
My bookmarks aren't here.
Maybe it's Subway. No, it's on there. Go to consoles and cheats. Right there.
Press R button a third time.
That is right. I was right.
You were right.
Yeah. There we go. So you press R twice and you hold it the third time, and you'll see arrows appear at the top. Tiny little arrows. And then if you press left and right, you can change the logo forever and pick whatever logo you want. Anyway, that's what you were all waiting for. So now, if you really love Specter of Torment, you could wear it on your title screen for all eternity. Or if you like the original Shovel Knight logo, you can put that there too. In addition, yeah, that's it.
Great. Are you sure nothing else?
That's it. That's absolutely everything in the game. Now you can change your logos. If you cleared all campaigns, you could also change the title screen to not have all 4 characters on it if you wanted to go back to an original look. Wow.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah, happy 3rd anniversary to Specter Night. Thank you to everyone who visited us at PAX, even though I wasn't there myself, but for Shannon and David and Sean and Waz.
It was great to see everybody at PAX, for everybody who came.
I hope you checked out, if you are wondering what we're working on, check out our Yacht Club Games Presents on YouTube. We put up a 10-minute video where we talk through all sorts of new stuff coming out. And I hope you're excited for what's ahead in 2020 and beyond.
Awesome.
Like, comment, and subscribe. You can... All right, I'm being told I'm not allowed to talk on the mic anymore. So thanks, everyone, and thank you for playing. I hope you enjoyed Specter of Torment as much as you enjoyed revisiting it today. Please subscribe.
No, look at what you did.
I know what I did.
Okay, good night, everybody.